Chapter 121. Top Secret Operation begins. The Quidditch field was so lively. Was Yang Tian really catching up on sleep? Of course not. At this time, his whole body was covered by a heavy black wizard robe, and his face was completely covered by a hood. He carefully checked the Marauder's map again, then cast an invisibility charm on himself and flew out of the common room. Yang Tian's current level of disillusionment is completely different from the last time he performed it at night. On the one hand, it was because Dumbledore explained the application of the disillusionment spell and gave him related books on Halloween night. On the other hand, it was because after Yang Tian's arduous efforts, he finally finished reading all the books in the invisible book section of the Hogwarts library. Yang Tian suffered a lot in this area. Not only was the space large, but there were also many books stored here. If quantity is not a problem for the intelligent computer, then the most difficult thing is that most of these books not only discuss invisibility, but the books themselves may also have the ability to be invisible. In order not to miss any book, Yang Tian often moves like a blind man groping in the dark on the bookshelf, which attracts the attention of many young wizards and the suspicion of Madame Pants. Now that the task was completed, Yang Tian's disillusionment charm had made a qualitative leap. Sometimes, Yang Tian even had a crazy idea, to use the strongest disillusionment charm to go around the principal's office to see if Dumbledore would notice. But he was just thinking about it. At this time, Yang Tian, under the blessing of the disillusionment charm, hid all the way to the door of the Slytherin common room. He was not in a hurry to act, but found a hidden place to lie in ambush, staring at the door of the lounge without blinking. Soon, Slytherin students came out one after another, holding various cheering signs in their hands and wearing scarves with the Slytherin logo around their necks. They unscrupulously belittled Gryffindor, and the scene was quite lively. Gradually, fewer and fewer people came out, and finally, after a few people left, the entire dungeon became quiet. At this time, Yang Tian took out the active point map and looked at it carefully, then continued to squat at the door. 10 minutes later, as the game was about to start, the door to the lounge suddenly opened. Pansy and Daphne walked out with depressed faces. "We shouldn't have listened to that bastard Blaze's one-sided story. Now we're both left alone," Daphne said indignantly. "That guy was lucky enough to escape. Otherwise, hey," Pansy said viciously. "I don't know when this matter will end. This is completely different from what I thought before. I don't care. If the problem still can't be solved by the end of the first grade, we'll ask Blaze to find a new method." The two chatted as they walked, whispering constantly. But just as they turned the corner, they suddenly heard two mosquito-like sounds behind their heads. The gangster fell to the ground. After that, they lost consciousness. Yang Tian hurried forward and used the levitation spell to transfer the two unconscious people into a nearby classroom. He had already observed that there was no one else inside. Yang Tian stared at them coldly, his wrist shaking continuously, and the magic power bursting out from the ancient magic wand actually transformed the two unconscious women into two hunchbacks. It was not until this moment that Yang Tian breathed a sigh of relief. After hiding the two tree protectors in his black robe, his figure disappeared. When Yang Tian appeared again, he had already arrived at the 8th floor of the castle. Yes, it was near the tapestry of the famous troll beating Barnabas with a club in the original book. After carefully checking the Marauder's map again, he concentrated on thinking, "I need a place to imprison people." After walking through that section of the wall 3 times in a row, a very smooth door finally appeared on the wall, and Yang Tian pushed the door open and walked in. The room of requirement is the place of imprisonment that has been planned long ago. Ever since the trip to Black Lake that night, when Yang Tian knew about the two women's plan, he had a plan in mind. However, he thought the plan was a bit cruel, and the other party was 2 girls, so he never made up his mind. People are harmless to tigers, but tigers are hurtful. During the Halloween monster attack, the ugly performance of the 2 women finally angered Yang Tian completely. So, the plan began. The room was particularly gloomy at this time. The thick iron door seemed to have been eroded by time and years, leaving deep marks. The rough stone walls and the mottled bloodstains on the ground seemed to be silently witnessing the pain and humiliation here. Several wooden chairs and iron chains completely demonstrated the coldness and cruelty of this place. Yang Tian did not hesitate at all. He restored the 2 unconscious women to their original appearance and locked them to the chairs with iron chains. With the tap of the magic wand, the 2 women slowly woke up. After seeing the surrounding environment clearly, the 2 women screamed in shock. Yang Tian slowly took off his hood, revealing his handsome face. He smiled grimly and said, "Have you ever thought that there would be such a day?" Daphne looked in the direction of the voice, and after seeing the other person's face clearly, she said with horror, "Yang Tian, aren't we good friends? Why are you doing this to us?" Pansy was also horrified, but still said with hatred, "Yang Tian, we misjudged you, what do you want?" Yang Tian looked at the two girls teasingly without saying a word. Instead, he took out two panoramic telescopes and played the recorded videos. A video of a conspiracy in the Slytherin common room and a Halloween troll battle. After the two videos were played, Daphne and Pansy looked pale and their legs were shaking like sieves. Daphne begged, "I'm sorry, Yang Tian, for the sake of my sister and father, please let me go." Pansy said stubbornly, "Humph, Daphne, don't ask him. It's useless. At worst, he can expel us from school. We can also ask our family for help and go to Dumstrang to study. I really don't know whether to say you are naive or stupid. Expel you? If it's really that simple, why did I bring you here?" Yang Tian's smile was full of sarcasm. Pansy was startled when she heard this, and after taking a quick look at the surroundings, she looked at Yang Tian blankly and said, What on earth do you want to do?" Yang Tian's words were still cold, "Don't worry, we will do it one by one." After that, Yang Tian slowly approached Daphne, lifted Daphne's chin with his hand, and continued, "I really don't understand why you, a silly woman, do this. Don't you know that your sister's life is in my hands? Don't you know that your family's most profitable economic lifeline is also in my hands? Kill me? If I die, your sister will be buried with me. Do you really want your sister to die?" Daphne said uncertainly, No, what I heard from you before was that your father can also cure this blood curse. Although the effect is not that fast." Yang Tian sneered, "Oh, so there is a backup plan. What about now? You are exposed. Have you thought about what will happen next? Stop your sister's treatment and let her die at the age of 30, or maybe 20. Or cut off the economic lifeline of your family, and let it decline and fall, and then what?" Daphne panicked and tried to ask, "Astoria has always been on such a good terms with you and treats you like a brother. You won't ignore her, right? The Green Grass family and the Foley family have a deep friendship. It won't be affected by you, right?" Yang Tian smiled, very contemptuously, "I have to say, dear Daphne, I am really defeated by your naivety. Whether I will save your sister depends on whether she will cry or laugh, give me flowers or wave her magic wand after I kill you, isn't it? The same is true for family matters. You want to kill our direct blood relatives of the Forley family, and you also want our Forley family to maintain a good relationship with your family. What good things are you thinking about?" Daphne's face turned pale when she heard this. She murmured, You can't do this. I just don't want to, I don't want to be bullied by you." Chapter 122. Soul Torture. Yang Tian ignored Daphne's reaction and unfolded a piece of parchment and placed it in front of Daphne. After the little girl had thoroughly read the contents on it, he said leisurely, "What do you want to say about this arrangement?" Daphne looked at Yang Tian in despair, tears already falling uncontrollably. She said in a trembling and flattering voice, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, I was really wrong, please forgive me this time. Really Yang Tian, as long as you can let my family go, let my father and sister go, no matter what you ask me to do, I will agree." Yang Tian lifted Daphne's chin higher, bringing her closer to him, and then he slowly said, "Do you really agree to any condition?" Daphne didn't care about much else. She saw the detailed plan of exterminating the Green Grass family on the parchment. This man was too scary. There was a fear deeply rooted in his bones. She hurriedly replied, "Yes, Yang Tian, as long as you can forgive me this time, I will agree to anything." "Very good, open your heart, I want to see your obedience. Remember, you only have this one chance." After that, Yang Tian pulled out the ancient magic wand and pointed it at the right side of his brain. The magic power emitted from his magic wand, pierced into his temple and went straight to his eyes. In an instant, Yang Tian's eyes were filled with a faint blue light, and the tyrannical aura instantly swept the whole room. Daphne stared at the devil in front of her with horror. This man was too scary. She asked weakly, What should I do?" At this moment, Yang Tian's tone was as cold as a machine. He spoke word by word, "You don't have to do anything, as long as you are obedient enough. After saying that, he stared at Daphne with his blue eyes. After a moment of observation, Yang Tian was extremely excited. According to the Eye of the Soul, a large amount of purple air appeared in the depths of Daphne's soul, which represented repentance and obedience. Yang Tian no longer hesitated, and gently rolled the magic wand again. Then his soul began to spin like a top, releasing bursts of black gas. The black gas continued to condense and finally gathered into a black seed. Yang Tian picked up the seed, looked at it, and then pressed it between Daphne's eyebrows without hesitation. Before Daphne could react, she felt a shock all over her body. After a scream of awe, the little girl fainted. Pansy, who had been quietly observing the situation, could no longer bear it. She asked in a trembling voice, You killed her." Yang Tian smiled even more strangely and said jokingly, "No, Pansy, she won't die. But, whether you will or not is hard to say." Pansy tried her best to suppress her fear and said calmly, I bet you don't dare to kill me, nor dare to go to war with my family. Our circle is very united, you will definitely not only face my family." Yang Tian laughed loudly upon hearing this and said, "I have to admit, although most of your ideas are naive, you are right about not going to start a war. It's not that I don't dare, but that I don't need to. Because now I only need to deal with you." After that, he took out the 9-turn golden needle from the white jade ring, and said reminiscingly, "This was a gift from my grandfather on my 10th birthday. By the way, I also know a kind of acupuncture, called the 13 Ghost Gate Needles. This is not the castrated version that has been simplified countless times in the world. This is the ancient Chinese medicine inherited from my Aunt Miu, and it is the only way to cure diseases and save lives." Seeing Pansy's disdainful expression that she tried her best to hide, Yang Tian smiled mysteriously and said, "But what I want to introduce to you today is a set of secret methods that specifically treat madness. It really works. The only drawback is that it hurts a little. Friendly reminder, the pain will double for each additional acupuncture point you pierce." Before he finished speaking, Yang Tian had already moved as fast as lightning and inserted the golden needle directly into the Ren Zhong point under Pan Xi's nose, chanting softly, "All needles are inserted into the ghost palace first, and then the ghost letter. All of them will be responded to." After that, he inserted another golden needle into the Xiao Shang point on the left thumb. At this moment, Pansy felt her whole body stiffen, and she could no longer move. What was even more terrifying was that as the 2 needles were inserted, she suddenly felt a numb and itchy sensation all over her body, like being bitten by ants. Although it didn't hurt, it was very uncomfortable. Despite this, Pansy heaved a sigh of relief. She was so scared just now, and that was it. Yang Tian, however, raised an eyebrow playfully and slowly took off Pansy's shoes and socks. The little girl was stunned and asked in shock, "What do you want to do?" Yang Tian didn't bother to answer her. He inserted a golden needle into the Yinbei point on the big toe of his right foot like lightning. Pansy, who was questioning just now, was struck by lightning, because in addition to the tingling and numbness, she also felt a tingling sensation like needles appearing all over her body from time to time. Without waiting for her to savor it carefully, Yang Tian inserted another needle into the Taiyuan A cup ointment. Pansy, who had been trying hard to endure just now, suddenly let out a heart-wrenching scream, accompanied by cursing and crying. After looking at Pansy's reaction, Yang Tian leaned closer and smiled, "Don't scream so loudly, it's very exhausting." Friendly reminder, the 13 Ghost Gate Needles is a combination of treatment methods that insert needles into 13 acupuncture points each time. We've only inserted 4 needles so far, and there are still 9 needles to go. We haven't even reached the halfway point yet. Why are you howling like a ghost?" When Pansy heard this, fear and despair instantly surged into her heart. Yang Tian didn't give her the chance to think too much, and said with a smile, "Let's go to the ghost road." As the words fell, the golden needle had already accurately pierced the Shenmei eye point on Pansy's right ankle. The heart-wrenching scream stopped abruptly and Pansy fainted instantly. Yang Tian, however, turned a blind eye and inserted another golden needle into the Fengfu point behind Pansy's head. Pansy, who had been unconscious, suddenly woke up again, but her eyes were bulging and bloodshot. Pansy completely collapsed, tears and snot flowing uncontrollably. She begged with despair, "Yang Tian, please, let me go, you can do whatever you want." Yang Tian remained calm, pointed his wand, and the faint blue light in his eyes reappeared. However, with the help of the Eye of the Soul, he was surprised to find that purple and red gases emerged from Pansy's soul at the same time. They entangled with each other and attacked each other, as if they wanted to completely annihilate each other. Yang Tian laughed loudly and said, "Little girl, I underestimated you. You are still not honest. Then let me tell you, in the face of absolute strength, all calculations will become nothingness." Just as he finished speaking, another golden needle landed on the cheek cartilage point under Pansy's right earlobe. Yang Tian didn't even need to appreciate the little girl's intense reaction. He saw that among the two gases that were originally evenly matched, the red gas quickly wilted and shrank until it finally disappeared, only the purple gas continued to gush out. Yang Tian knew that he won. At this moment, Pansy's whole body was shaking violently as if in spasm, her face was completely distorted, tears were streaming down her face, her eyes were staring blankly ahead, her eyes had long lost their focus. This golden opportunity is right before his eyes, Yang Tian can't miss it. In just a moment, the same black seed was pressed into Pansy's forehead, and her consciousness seemed to be completely plunged into darkness. Chapter 123. Unable to resist. It seemed like a day had passed. A year? Or was it just a minute? The two women who had fainted slowly opened their eyes. After briefly recalling what had happened before, their confused eyes were instantly filled with fear, and their screams resounded throughout the room. They looked around in fear for something, but when they saw Yang Tian leaning on a chair in front of them, their screams stopped abruptly, and a feeling of willing obedience spread from the depths of their souls. The two women seemed unaware, and uttered two words from the bottom of their hearts, "Master." Looking at the performance of the two women, Yang Tian nodded with satisfaction. He stood up and pressed the foreheads of the two women with his left and right hands. In an instant, the two memories, with Yang Tian's palms as a bridge, flooded into his mind like a tide. Yang Tian did not speak, but silently browsed the simple and childish past of the two. After a moment, his eyes gradually became sharper. In fact, Yang Tian has always been a little confused about Pansy and Daphne's mentality. To say that they do have some grudges against him, but to say that they hate him so much that they would kill him, it shouldn't be said. Especially since the two of them had succumbed to his pua before, how could they change so quickly and so violently? But after reading the memories of the two, he finally found the answer. I have to say, Blaise Zabanai is indeed a talent. Since the beginning of the school year, every time he had a conflict with the two girls, and every time the two girls complained about him in their small circle, it became a great opportunity for this guy to get closer to them and fool the two girls. It is hard to imagine that such an 11-year-old boy is actually a master of psychology. After a series of operations, he became the nightmare, lifelong enemy and stumbling block of the two girls. If he is not moved away, the future of the two girls will be bleak. After that, the three of them would get together whenever they had time to study how to make a boy named Yang Tian disappear completely. This had become the spiritual sustenance of the two girls. Seeing the devil-like man in front of them with an uncertain expression, the two women's souls began to panic and tremble. They buried their heads deeply in their chests. Although they didn't know why the man was angry, they didn't dare to think too much, let alone say a word. If there were someone who could see through souls like Yang Tian, he would definitely find that at this moment, where the two women's souls were, a black plant shadow was plowing deep into the bottom of their souls like it had broken through the ground, and the branches of the plant were gradually entwining and wrapping their souls. Some of the parts where the branches and souls were in contact seemed to be completely fused together, and could not be distinguished from each other. Whenever the two girls showed signs of resistance, their thoughts would be immediately ignited by the black branches and then turned into ashes. At the same time, the burned parts would send out a heart-wrenching pain from their hearts. Yang Tian was very satisfied when he saw the painful expressions on the two women's faces. From the moment the soul seeds were planted in their souls, the fate of the two women was already determined. They would faithfully carry out all his orders, and no matter how violently they resisted in their hearts, they could not break the shackles deeply rooted in their souls. More importantly, as time goes by, when the black plant completely envelopes the souls of the two women and finally merges into one, they will give up all resistance, willingly work for themselves, and put themselves in their shoes, just like the fanatics of some sects. Although it would be a long process, Yang Tian was not in a hurry. The two girls were his first pair of experimental subjects, and he had to observe their changes carefully. For example, the book clearly states that even if a soul seed is planted in a person, they are still an independent individual. They have independent personalities and independent thinking. Apart from their loyalty and fanaticism to their master, they will not change in any way. Yang Tian couldn't understand this one thing. If it was true, then this soul magic was too terrifying. If he wanted, wouldn't he be able to make everyone loyal to him? He was even somewhat glad for his trip to the Forbidden Book area. That's right, both the soul eye and the soul seed were obtained from that memory and the book deep in the soul. However, all of this is not without restrictions. At the very least, the soul seed casting requirements are very high, and the object of the casting must be completely obedient to the caster. At the moment of casting, the resistance must be far less than the submission. Otherwise, if the spell is cast by force or by surprise, it is very likely that the caster will be backfired and his own soul will be severely damaged. Of course, Yang Tian did have some special methods, such as the 13 ghost needles. But for an adult wizard, the most terrifying thing is often not pain. That is to say, today's target is 2 little girls, otherwise Yang Tian really doesn't have the courage to give it a try. Seeing the 2 women in front of him looking terrified, Yang Tian put on a gentle smile and said, "From today on, you will be my most trusted subordinates." Looking at that handsome and harmless face, the 2 women shuddered at the same time. They quickly bowed and said, "Your will is the direction I will move forward." But before he could finish his words, Pansy's screams rang out again. Yang Tian didn't care at all and continued gently, "It's okay. You still need some time to adapt to your new identities. But you need to pay attention to a few points. First, once you leave this door, we will continue to be the same in front of outsiders. Don't let anyone know about our relationship. Remember, I'm talking about everyone." Seeing the 2 women nodding in agreement, Yang Tian continued, "Second, from now on, record all conversations with Blaze in detail and report to me regularly. If there is any important information, report it to me immediately regardless of the time. Finally, don't try to find out any information, so as not to alert the enemy. Just record what you see and hear. Any other questions?" The 2 women looked at each other and quickly replied in a low voice, "No problem, Master." Yang Tian nodded in satisfaction. After checking the Marauders map again, Yang Tian led the 2 girls to quietly leave the room of requirement, while the Quidditch game was still going on. It seemed that because the plan was completed smoothly, or because the impulse of experiment in his heart was released, Yang Tian was in a good mood at this time. He hummed a little tune, rode on the cloud, and returned to the dormitory leisurely. He did not plan to watch the boring Quidditch game, but was ready to devote his energy to the thesis. Time was running out. But plans can't keep up with changes. When Yang Tian entered the dormitory, he saw Meng Jiao waiting on the windowsill for a long time. Could it be that because he was in the room of requirement, the little guy couldn't find him? Without bothering to think further, he quickly walked to Meng Jiao, took the letter and started reading it. But after just 2 glances, Yang Tian went out excitedly again. Because the letter only contained a simple sentence, "We have made an important discovery. Please come to Hogsmeade to discuss it immediately, Old Xia." Chapter 124. Important discovery. It is still this deserted little village, and still this dilapidated 2-story building. As soon as Yang Tianyi entered the room, he asked excitedly, "Grandpa Xia, which line has a major breakthrough?" Hearing this, Old Xia laughed out loud, "Young master is wise. Do you still remember the line you told Wu Qi to follow about old Tom? Originally, there were no useful clues, but in the past 2 days, this organization seemed to be planning some big event, so they made frequent moves, and finally Wu Qi discovered the clues. Ziaju, come and tell the young master about it." Upon hearing this, the drunkard, the leader of the 5 idiots, stepped forward and said, "This is indeed a major breakthrough. Yesterday morning, old Tom's upline suddenly showed up at his home. It was a black-robed wizard. We don't know what the 2 of them talked about, but when we followed up on this upline afterwards, we got a pleasant surprise. We have discovered 4 strongholds. And we have used the secret method of primer search to investigate, and we have basically confirmed that, except for 1 stronghold of a higher level, there are at least 30 people in each of the other 3 strongholds." As he spoke, Zhuge took out a map and pointed out the locations of the strongholds to Yang Tian. After thinking for a while, he added, "But most of them are currently packing their bags and frequently mention a place name." "Where?" Yang Tian asked impatiently. "Albania," the drunkard answered immediately. "Albania?" Yang Tian's thoughts were all over the place. Wasn't that where Voldemort had hidden in the original book? But the Dark Lord was on the back of Professor Quirrell's head. What exactly does Sarek want to do? Talk about cooperation? No, that doesn't require so many people. Could it be that they want to? Yang Tian suddenly thought of a possibility, and the smile on his face could no longer be suppressed. Do you know how many people are left behind in their stronghold? Yang Tian asked again. It's impossible to be completely sure, but judging from the scale of the mobilization, the number of people left behind in these small strongholds will be more than 10, and no more than 20 at most, right? Drunkard said uncertainly. As for that large stronghold, since we detected the presence of high-level wizards inside, in order to avoid alerting the enemy, we did not use excessive reconnaissance methods. Therefore, we can only roughly determine that there are about 100 people in this stronghold. If they stay behind, it is estimated that at least half of them will stay. Hearing this, Yang Tian was moved and asked, do you know when these people will set off? Currently, some black-robed wizards have left the base, but they left in an organized group, making it difficult to track them. Judging from the current situation, all personnel should be mobilized before the sun sets. Yang Tian's eyes suddenly lit up, and a crazy plan swirled in his mind for a long time. Grandpa Xia, how many talismans do we have? Are they enough to take down these 4 strongholds? Yang Tian suddenly asked. Don't worry, young master. We have made sufficient preparations to protect you this time. We have talismans, of course, and quite a few of them. However, are you sure you want to attack these people? The head of the family has ordered you to ensure your absolute safety. A battle like this. Otherwise, you can go back to school and wait for news, and leave these people to us. Old Xia asked uncertainly. No, Grandpa Xia, I think you misunderstood. We are not only here to fight, but also to act. Yang Tian quickly told him the plan he had come up with. Is this possible, young master? Logically speaking, I cannot take you on an adventure. Old Xia said with a little hesitation. Grandpa Xia, how can this be considered a risk? There are only a few of them. Their strength is far inferior to the last battle at the Research Institute, and our strength is actually enhanced. And we did it deliberately, so I really don't think there is any danger in this operation. Seeing Elder Xia's expression of concern, Yang Tian hurriedly continued, as long as our operation is successful this time, other benefits aside, at least my parents' side will be completely cleared. The most important thing now is to prepare for the battle as soon as possible, and not to disclose the news to anyone, including my parents. After hearing this, Old Xia finally made up his mind. After everyone discussed the details, Yang Tian hurriedly returned to Hogwarts Castle through the secret passage. In the abandoned classroom, Yang Tian ignored his friend's heated discussion about the game and went straight to the point. Parvati, I need your help now. When did you become so polite? Just tell me if you have something to say. Parvati said in confusion. I need you to get the hair of Ron's pet mouse as soon as possible without arousing anyone's suspicion. Is there a problem? Yang Tian asked immediately. Of course it's no problem. Ron always brings his scabbers to the common room and I've played with it before. But you can ask me for help, but you have to tell me why you do this. Parvati said as a matter of course. Go and do it as soon as possible. I must verify my thoughts first before I can know the answer. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation tomorrow. Seeing Yang Tian was so decisive, Parvati said nothing more and turned around and left. Instead, a group of friends surrounded Yang Tian with unfriendly faces, as if they were determined to get to the bottom of the matter. But this time, Yang Tian did not compromise. He calmly revised the paper in his hand, letting the wind and rain blow it away. At 8 o'clock in the evening, again in the abandoned classroom, Parvati took out 7 or 8 strands of hair under Yang Tian's anxious eyes. Humph, you start hiding again, it's really annoying. After that, she reluctantly handed the things to Yang Tian. This time is different. But don't worry, I will give you a satisfactory explanation tomorrow and I will never shirk my responsibility. Seeing everyone's slightly relieved expressions, Yang Tian asked again, are you sure you didn't arouse Ron's suspicion? Was the little mouse not frightened? How could I possibly doubt it? I was just combing the little guy's hair. Ron is really unhygienic. Banban's hair is all tangled. Isn't it normal to comb out a few strands? Parvati replied unhappily. Hearing this, Yang Tian immediately put his worries to rest. He then led everyone to start today's learning task. At 12 o'clock midnight, on the outskirts of Hogsmeade village, relying on the Marauder's map and the secret passage, Yang Tian, dressed in nightmare attire, arrived at the pre-arranged gathering point without any danger. However, he saw more than wizards dressed in nightmare attire had been waiting for a long time. Thinking about what happened just now, Yang Tian couldn't help but smile. These friends are really not easy to deal with. They didn't sleep in the middle of the night, but hid in the main roads inside and outside the public lounge, with the purpose of surrounding him. Obviously, everyone guessed that he would take action tonight. But the problem was that he had the live map in his hands, and he also had the somersault cloud, so he could just change the route. As for letting these friends wait in vain, Yang Tian could only say sorry in his heart. Young master, now you are here, take a look at how we look. Are we okay? Old Xia stepped forward quickly and asked half-jokingly. After Yang Tian glanced at everyone one by one, he smiled and said, very good, it's absolutely perfect. However, if you don't use your best weapons, won't your combat effectiveness be affected? Don't worry, young master. They are all handy weapons, they just changed their appearance. Besides, aren't we mainly using talismans this time? Old Xia showed no panic at all. Yang Tian was filled with pride when he heard this, and waved his hand and said, okay, let's go. Chapter 125. Best Actor. Stanton is a village in the Cotswolds district of Gloucestershire. The village is built almost entirely of Cotswold stone and is full of ancient and charming rural atmosphere. It was late at night and the village was silent. However, more than 20 members of the Nightmare group were seen walking silently on the village road and arrived in front of a building in an instant. It is a small one-story building made of honey-colored Jurassic limestone that looks out of place in its surroundings. But these had nothing to do with the Nightmare group. As soon as they approached the small building, they scattered to investigate the situation. Only 5 people were left to surround the small building, and at the same time, they pressed a small white jade slab against the wall. After a while, a white jade slab of the same style in Xiaolao's hand lit up. The stone slab shows what's happening inside the small building, which is extremely lifelike. After observing for a while, Elder Xia smiled and said, sure enough, the Western Traceless Extension spell has a 3-layer structure inside. There are 11 people left behind, and the leader is on the 3rd layer. Yang Tian also took a look and said, this stronghold is not of high level, and there are no green-robed wizards here. Elder Xia, assign tasks and let's make a quick decision. Remember, try to end the battle with talismans. After hearing this, Old Xia did not hold back. After some arrangements, he led his men to sneak in quietly. How could such a stronghold not have an alarm device? But these 5 idiots were indeed experts in reconnaissance. Before they even entered the house, they knew all the alarm devices clearly. The final result was that all 11 people in the stone house died quietly on their beds without any resistance. Next, Yang Tian and his team followed suit. In just 20 minutes, all the dark wizards in the village of Bibury in the Cotsworth area and the town of Shaftesbury in Dorset were wiped out. Finally, everyone arrived at the last target of this operation, a high-level stronghold in Whitby, North Yorkshire. They walked along the winding river in secret. After a few breaths, all the members of Nightmare arrived in front of a 3-story building with red brick walls. Unlike before, the 5 idiots did not approach the building. They just shone the white jade slab at a distance and then retreated and said, there are about 60 people left, 4 floors inside, and the exact location cannot be detected. Do we really want to attack directly? Old Xia asked with a little concern. Yes, guard the retreat route and do your best to kill the enemy. 3 minutes, we only have 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, no matter what the outcome, everyone retreat. Elder Xia, the high-level wizard is in your hands. Finally, try to end the battle with the ice crystal talisman. After saying that, he took out a bottle of medicine. The reagent in the bottle was like a sticky mud, and bubbles were slowly coming out. Yang Tian remained calm and added a hair into it, and the potion instantly turned into a dark purple. Yang Tian drank the potion in one gulp, endured the disgusting smell of rotten leaves, and waited silently. After a moment, he finally spoke, action. Without any hesitation, the 5 idiots took the lead, but they heard a loud boom and the door of the Western-style building fell down. Kiu and Lianjiao followed in. They raised their hands instantly and several talismans shot towards the flashing figure. Enemy attack! The screams echoed through the house, but stopped abruptly the next moment. Flames appeared and screams continued. In just 20 seconds, there was no one left alive on the 1st floor, only more than a dozen charred corpses. No one dared to relax at all, because after a burst of noise upstairs, no black-robed wizard came out to meet the enemy. Obviously, they had gathered together. However, the crowd was not afraid of this. They each held a Vajra talisman and a divine travel talisman and rushed upstairs. Sure enough, as soon as everyone emerged from the second floor, an overwhelming attack of magic spells arrived. The 5 idiots stood up first, and the white jade slab instantly turned into a transparent protective wall, blocking all the attacks. The people who came up later also drew out their talismans and fought against the opponent. Lianjiu and Kiu launched a surprise attack on the black-robed wizards from both sides. In an instant, the black-robed wizards were beaten so badly that they couldn't even raise their heads. Assholes, you dare to attack our base? It seems that you are a group of rats who are afraid of the light. Then die, thunder explosion. A green-robed wizard cast the spell without hesitation. Seeing this, the 5 idiots hurriedly pushed the transparent protective shield forward. However, after hearing several boom explosions, the protective shield was covered with spider web-like cracks, and the terrifying blasting spell had completely lost its effect. Of course, Old Xia would not miss this great opportunity. He stepped forward, pointed his magic wand at the green-robed wizard, and silently said fixed in his heart, and an ice crystal talisman shot out. The next moment, the green-robed wizard turned into an ice sculpture without any surprise. At this moment, Yang Tian, who saw this scene, was very anxious. He said, "Boss, you are not just here to kill people today, you are here to act. I, the protagonist, haven't even appeared on the stage yet, and the biggest villain has already appeared?" As soon as he thought of this, he hurriedly shouted, "The enemy leader is dead, everyone follow me." After saying that, he rushed out first. When Elder Xia and the others saw the young master rushing, they panicked at first, then, as if they remembered something, they slowed down their attacks, looking like they were watching a show. Sure enough, the show began. However, the short wizard who covered himself tightly took the initiative to attack, and a fire charm flew away. The problem was that this fire charm seemed to be a counterfeit product, and was blocked by the magic spell flying towards him. Seeing that his mighty power was blocked, the opponent's overwhelming magic attack was not fake. For a moment, the short wizard was overwhelmed, dodging left and right, rushing left and right, and even rolling on the ground several times, barely avoiding the numerous magic attacks. Unfortunately, due to his big movements, his hood slipped down. At first glance, it turned out to be a short bald man. His hair was grey, and he had a pointed nose and a face like a rat. This appearance really shocked everyone. The bald man's reaction was even more exaggerated. He covered his face with his hands in fear, tears of regret streaming down his face. "Oh, no, my face, this is an unforgivable mistake, they actually saw my face." Then, he said in a cold tone, "Kill them all, leave no one alive." After that, he put on his hood again in a panic. This acting skill really amazed everyone in Nightmare. But his words were also like a death warrant. After receiving the order, the Nightmare people attacked the black-robed wizards like crazy, and all kinds of talismans were thrown out like crazy. In just a dozen seconds, all the black-robed wizards were killed. "Humph, you dared to search for the master's whereabouts, this is what will happen to you." The sinister and sharp voice sounded again, "He, they will never guess that it was us who did it. My great master, what a perfect plan." After that, he bowed devoutly in the air and then shouted, "Retreat." Chapter 126, The Sarek Conspiracy. At 2 o'clock in the morning, in the magnificent office of Sarek headquarters deep underground in the suburbs of London, a green flame flashed in the classical and luxurious fireplace, and Russell, dressed in a red wizard robe, walked out expressionlessly. He said in a cold tone, "Felix, you better give me a perfect explanation for waking me up so late." Faced with the threat, Felix, who had been waiting by the fireplace, was not panicked at all. He said with a sad face, "We just mobilized people to Albania, and 4 bases were destroyed, one of which was a secondary base in Whitby City." "You said, what?" Russell asked word by word. "Sir, this is the fact." Felix's tone was a little awkward. "Who did it? Give me an answer now, immediately, right now." Russell's eyes were filled with murderous intent. "That's the guy." Felix quickly froze a video on the scene where a bald little wizard's hood slipped off. "I seem to have seen this person somewhere, but why can't I remember where he is?" Russell pondered. His name is Peter Pettigrew, and his nickname is Wormtail. Felix tried to explain. I also have an impression of this name. I remember it, the winner of the Order of Merlin, first class, and the secret keeper of Potter Cabin, but isn't he dead? Russell was even more puzzled. Sir, you have an impression of his appearance, it must be because of his other identity. Do you remember the man behind him when you last saw the Dark Lord? Felix had to remind him again. Russell's eyes suddenly widened, as if he had realized something, or was shocked. He didn't say anything more, but played the entire video again. Dark Lord, very good, it seems that you are not dead after all. What a wonderful cooperative relationship we once had, but why don't you have any regard for the old friendship? Do you think you can disgust me by getting some shady rats? Russell muttered. My lord, there is one more thing. Recently, some wizards pretending to be Arceloke have appeared in the wizarding world, and they often attack lone wizards. Now the wizarding world is in a panic, and many wizards are calling for the killing of our organization. The Ministry of Magic is also under pressure to negotiate with the Muggle government. Felix continued to tell the information in his hand. Russell's anger disappeared when he heard this. He sat down gracefully on the sofa and said slowly, Felix, our great Dark Lord is showing off his muscles to us by freezing all the assets of his capable subordinates in the Muggle world. Let me think, let's start with Lucius Malfoy. Oh, right. Let's send out a suicide squad to sneak into the wizarding world, walk around, cast a dark mark, and kill a few wizards who have made contributions in the Second Wizarding War. We can help each other. Yes, sir. Felix said hurriedly. By the way, what's the current situation of the new research institute? How is the material collection going? How many new blood samples have been collected? What's the research progress? Your Excellency, although I am reluctant to admit it, I still have to say that in a short period of time, we cannot catch up with the research speed of the previous institute. These damn Death Eaters' secret forces are really cruel. Except for a piece of research data that we backed up in advance, everything else has to start from scratch. This cannot be made up in a few years. Felix answered tremblingly. I don't want to hear any excuses. Now that we have confirmed the other party's identity, we will follow this clue and activate all the secret lines of our intelligence department. I don't believe that we can't find the whereabouts of the Dark Lord. Russell said without giving in. In addition, we must send more personnel overseas to make up for the losses as much as possible. The hospital must also speed up the process, as blood samples are equally important. Next, Felix respectfully recorded all the instructions issued by Russell until dawn. It was almost noon when Yang Tian flew out of the dormitory on the somersault cloud. It must be said that choosing to act last night was a wise choice. At least he could sleep in and get enough sleep on Sunday, right? Thinking of last night's actions, Yang Tian felt both angry and amused. I was tightly wrapped in the center of the team for the whole night. Apart from that wonderful performance, I could say that I did nothing. Isn't that irritating? But what about those guys praising my acting skills with such conviction last night? As soon as we arrived at the common room, a group of little heads popped out, their eyes full of curiosity. Yang Tian smiled even more happily. Okay everyone, let's go. I will tell you everything I know. After getting a positive answer, everyone, led by Yang Tian, headed straight for the abandoned classroom. Of course, they also brought along Neville, Hannah, and Parvati who were waiting at the door of the Ravenclaw common room. So you don't believe us? Padma said somewhat dissatisfiedly after hearing the whole story. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have told you the whole story. But I can't base the lives of people who risked their lives for me on my subjective will. I have to be responsible for them. Padma was just complaining, but she felt a little embarrassed when she heard Yang Tian's answer. Just as she was about to explain, Zhang Chu couldn't wait to ask, so, there really is something wrong with that old Tom, right? Of course, I still keep him now, just hoping that someone will come in contact with him again. Yang Tian smiled. But how do you know that Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew? Has he really surrendered to the Dark Lord? Thinking of combing the hair of such a thing, Parvati felt disgusted and asked with a shiver. You should know the detection ability of the 5 idiots. They were the ones who discovered the clues about Peter Pettigrew. What is certain now is that he did surrender to the Dark Lord. But the specific details need to be further explored. Looking at the surprised expressions of the crowd, Yang Tian said calmly. At this point, he could only tell a little lie. How else could he say that he was a time traveler who was familiar with the plot? Haha. Parvati, don't reveal your identity when you go back. This incident is too big, and I suspect the news will get out. Then everyone will be in danger, especially Yang Tian. Penelope said worriedly. I still think that this matter should be reported to the school, Yang Tian. We are only 11 years old, and this should not be borne by you. What you should do now is to master more magical knowledge and ensure your own safety. Let the adults do the rest. Hermione still spared no effort to persuade. No, Hermione, you are wrong. From the moment this evil organization surrounded and killed Yang Tian, there was no escape for Yang Tian himself and us. Unexpectedly, it was not Yang Tian who spoke up to refute, but Neville. Harry had to face the Dark Lord when he was a baby, I had to face the Death Eaters when I was a baby, and Yang encountered an evil organization at the beginning of the school day. We didn't go looking for trouble, but trouble found us. Another point is that we are not young anymore. Think about Lee Jordan and Blaise Zabinai, aren't they about the same age as us? Even the Dark Lord himself formed his own organization when he was studying at Hogwarts. I know I'm a little stupid and a little unconfident. But I will always stand by Yang Tian and help him, just like he helped me. Looking at this usually honest and taciturn little fat boy, Hermione felt a little admiration and aggrieved, and for a moment she couldn't control her tears. Seeing this, Yang Tian patted her shoulder comfortingly and said, Hermione, I understand what you mean, but I really can't do this time. I won't put the entire life and property of me, my parents, my relatives, my family, and those who are willing to risk their lives for me on others. I don't think you will either, right? Hermione lowered her head and thought carefully. After a long time, she finally raised her head firmly and nodded vigorously. This time she was really convinced. Chapter 127, School Fight. The weekend always passed quickly, and before they had time to savor it, it was already far away from the little wizards. On Monday morning, Yang Tian went to the auditorium for dinner as usual, but saw that other friends had already arrived. What's going on with you? Why are you here so early and in so many groups? Yang Tian asked. According to my sister, there will be a big move in Gryffindor this morning, so the friends made an appointment last night to come and watch the fun. Padma said excitedly. Seeing Yang Tian's confused look, Hermione explained, in the Quidditch match on Saturday, Slytherin used dirty foul tactics to win the game. Gryffindor protested at the time and the two sides even confronted each other. Fortunately, Madame Hooch intervened, otherwise the two houses would have gone to war. However, Gryffindor obviously won't let this matter go so easily. Their captain, Oliver Wood, has said that Slytherin will be in trouble on Monday. Zhang Qiu also smiled mischievously and said, not only that, I heard from my Slytherin friends that they already knew about Wood's remarks and regarded it as a provocation. They also said that we will see you on Monday. This is like Mars hitting the Earth. Nothing serious will happen, right? Yang Tian asked uncertainly. No, don't worry. The conflict between the Lion House and the Snake House has a long history, and the peak period of fighting is after the Quidditch match, so don't worry. When the day they stop playing, you need to worry about whether something big has happened in Hogwarts. Penelope said nonchalantly. When Yang Tian heard this, his thoughts became active. Judging from the character he created, shouldn't he also participate in such a wonderful scene and show his presence? He didn't know if it was because he was guilty, but Penelope's words yesterday, I suspect there will be rumors, made him think for a while. If he pretended to be a good boy and invisible at this time, would it arouse suspicion? Just as Yang Tian's mind raced, he saw a tall boy leading the way, followed closely by Angelina, the Weasley brothers and other Quidditch players. Behind him, the little wizards of Gryffindor followed in high spirits. Yang Tian also saw Lee Jordan, Harry and Ron in the long line. And Parvati was still winking at her friends in the line. The team moved very quickly and arrived at the Gryffindor table in a moment. The leader is Gryffindor Quidditch captain Oliver Wood. Penelope introduced the situation to Yang Tian in a low voice. Before he finished speaking, as if it had been agreed, Slytherin team captain Marcus Flint entered the hall with his teammates and schoolmates. Yang Tian took a quick look and found many familiar faces. The one who attracted his attention the most was naturally Draco. He walked in the team with Goyle and Crabbe in a very arrogant manner, while Blaise followed closely on both sides, being extremely attentive. Pansy and Daphne followed at the end of the team, and were obviously targeted. But the two women didn't seem to care, and looked around from time to time. When their eyes swept over Yang Tian, the two women paused, but remembered Yang Tian's previous instructions, and nodded slightly and followed the team. Yang Tian frowned slightly. He left in a hurry on Saturday, but still overlooked some things. It seems that he still needs to have a good talk with the two girls. It is shameful that the legitimate daughters of the 28 sacred families have ended up like this. While he was thinking about it, the young wizards of Gryffindor, led by Wood, had already rushed forward and confronted the young wizards of Slytherin, led by Marcus. Wood, I heard that you were very unwilling to accept your defeat and wanted to cause trouble for us Slytherins. I really don't know who gave you the courage. Marcus took the lead. You only know how to use dirty means to gain benefits. Your behavior is disgusting. Wood refused to give in. Draco suddenly stood out from the crowd and said arrogantly, if you lose, you lose. Are all Gryffindors like you, making excuses for your incompetence? Ron seemed to be born to be incompatible with Draco. Hearing this, he shouted angrily, Draco, how dare you insult my Gryffindor? I will kill you. How dare you? Draco raised his head higher. But he saw Goyle had already rushed forward and confronted Ron. Marcus seemed unhappy that some younger kids stole the spotlight. He glared at them before continuing, this kind of childish quarrel is meaningless. Wood, is this what you Gryffindors call showing us off? Angelina was furious when she heard that. She pulled out her wand and said, why waste time talking to them? Let's finish the fight and have breakfast. After saying that, the wand glowed red and an evil curse quickly flew towards Marcus. Marcus was also shocked. He really didn't expect this crazy woman to hit him so easily. After a flurry of activity, he managed to dodge it. He dodged it, but the Slytherin goalkeeper Miles Bleach behind him was in trouble. He was hit directly in the face by the curse, which instantly made 2 long Welsh leeks grow out of his nose. This attack completely ignited the fuse. The little wizards on both sides drew out their wands and started to fight each other. For a while, spells were flying everywhere. The little wizards from other academies dodged in a hurry, and some little wizards who didn't have time to dodge were also affected. Originally, Yang Tian was still hesitating whether to participate. It was not worth it to get hurt in such a chaotic scene. But as he watched, he started to laugh. Although these students were fighting fiercely, they all had a bottom line. Even the senior students would at most cast some evil curses or make the opponent's head bleed, but there was no danger to their lives at all. What else is there to say? Go in. He pulled over Angelina, who had empty hands, a bruised face, countless sprouts growing on her head, and was tap dancing at her feet. In the face of the discontented look from the senior, he cast a spell of gentleness on her, and then took out a bottle of magic potion and forced her to drink it. Angelina immediately felt that her injuries were recovering rapidly. But before Angelina could express her gratitude, Yang Tian had already put the wand she dropped in panic back into her hand, and pushed her back to the battlefield, saying, Senior, go ahead and beat them up. Angelina was speechless. Before she could recover from the shock, several more spells attacked her, forcing her to dodge hurriedly. Just wait for me, you bastard. That's not all. In the following time, Yang Tian rode on his somersault cloud and strolled around the edge of the battlefield, healing this person or giving that person a potion. When he was in a good mood, he would cast an armor spell on someone, and it was no problem to add fuel to the fire. He doesn't care whether you are from the Snake Court or the Lion Court, he will help anyone as long as he is happy. It is a fierce battle, but he enjoys it very much. Just when Yang Tian was having a great time, he heard Fred yelling, Yang Tian, you bastard, which side are you from? George, beat him up. Asshole Fred, I just gave you a recovery potion worth a gold galleon. Just wait and see how I deal with you. After saying that, the ancient magic wand was raised high, and a stream of water spurted out. But in the next moment, Yang Tian was dumbfounded, and even the wand in his hand began to tremble. Chapter 128, Accidental Injury and Chase. Because on Yang Tian's attack route, a beautiful face like an iceberg snow lotus suddenly appeared. Oh no, Senior Elena, get out of the way! Yang Tian shouted at the top of his lungs. But it was of no use, it happened too suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the stream of water actually hit the face of this cold and aloof senior sister. This is not the point. The point is that Yang Tian was making trouble again. The spell he chanted was called the water mantra. It was not aguamenti, clear water like a spring, but a new application he had developed, the Aqua Eructo. Its effect was similar to the water mantra, summoning a stream of water. However, the water of the Aqua Eructo was larger and more destructive. How to describe it? It was like a powerful water jet from a high-pressure water gun. The result is a tragedy. At this moment, Elena had her hair disheveled and looked miserable. More importantly, she had that heart-wrenching death gaze. "Senior, sister, do you believe me if I say I didn't mean it?" Yang Tian asked tentatively in a trembling voice. Elena said calmly, "It's okay, Junior, I promise. I promise not to beat you to death." At the end, she drew out her magic wand with a stern voice and launched a crazy attack. How smart is Yang Tian? Elena was only halfway through her words when he realized something was wrong and started to flee frantically on his cloud. Sure enough, let the storm come even harder. "Senior, I really didn't mean it. You have to believe me. Stop talking nonsense. I must teach you a lesson today. Senior, you still need to think carefully. If you don't go and help, Slytherin will be wiped out soon." Elena was startled when she heard this and quickly looked around. The next moment she knew she was being fooled. The people around her were still fighting. Just as she was about to continue chasing, she suddenly felt herself being pushed out by a huge force. At the same time, the bastard boy's shouting rang in her ears, "Senior Angelina, there's another one." My goodness, at this moment, Elena flew directly into the battle group like a cloud, and just as she stabilized her body, she saw Angelina, after hearing Yang Tian's prompt, cast several evil curses at her without thinking. After she dodged several spells in a panic, she was finally hit by a dancing spell. So, the usually arrogant and cold senior sister was dancing on the battlefield with her hair disheveled. The little wizards who were watching the fun around her shouted that it was exciting and couldn't help but admire her. At this time, Angelina also came to her senses. After seeing the person she hit, she was stunned and hurried over to help Elena remove the curse. Although the two girls' colleges were full of conflicts, they were in the same Transfiguration Club, so they had always communicated with each other. And although they both had prejudices and dissatisfaction with each other's colleges, they were both arrogant and disdained to use those dirty tricks, so it could be considered a healthy competition. But now, Yang Tian had pushed them into a war. After the dancing spell was broken, Elena was completely mad. She had completely lost her usual coldness and arrogance. She roared, "Yang Tian, I'm going to kill you." After that, she danced her wand up and down, casting spells at Yang Tian like they were free. Yang Tian laughed loudly while running away on his cloud. He was not a good-tempered person. Since he couldn't explain it clearly, I would not explain it. So, in the following time, Yang Tian not only became more slippery and difficult to catch, but also cast an enhanced version of the water purification spell from time to time. This scene directly excited all the young wizards present, and the originally chaotic battlefield gradually turned into a lively stand. Everyone seemed to want to see the final result of this chase game. Yang Tian's friends also enjoyed the fun and applauded. Their hands were almost red from clapping. It was rare for them to see such a naughty Yang Tian. With such a good opportunity, they naturally would not spoil the fun. The Weasley brothers were so excited that they seemed to have completely forgotten what Yang Tian had done before. They set off fireworks desperately in the sky above the hall and shouted, "Come on, Yang Tian, you are the one we are chasing." Only Angelina followed closely behind Elena, as if she was afraid that this senior sister would get angry and kill Yang Tian. But the smile on her face seemed to imply that she just wanted to watch this classic drama from a closer distance. Seeing that the situation around him was beyond his expectation, Yang Tian followed the principle of not being defeated by the current situation, and just drifted a few times, and flashed to the door of the hall. In a trance, he saw a figure standing at the door with his back to the light. As the saying goes, the more skilled you are, the more courageous you are. He did not panic, and changed direction and turned again, and flashed out of the hall from the upper right of the figure. Just when Yang Tian was about to let the fish leap in the vast sea and the birds fly freely in the sky, the figure suddenly shouted in a stern voice, "Yang Tian, have you had enough of the trouble? Get down here." When Yang Tian heard this, he immediately wilted. He obediently parked his somersault cloud beside the figure and said obediently, "Professor McGonagall, are you coming to have breakfast too? Today's pumpkin pie is very good, you can try it." Professor McGonagall's mouth twitched. Just as she was about to answer, she saw Elena rushing over in anger, looking like she was ready to fight. She quickly stopped her and said, "Elena, stop first, and you, Angelina, where are you going to hide? Seeing that it was Professor McGonagall, the two girls also stopped walking with an embarrassed look on their faces. The only difference was that Elena looked like she was going to eat Yang Tian, while Angelina had a mischievous expression on her face. Looking at her proud disciple who was in such a mess, Professor McGonagall felt her eyelids twitch. She shouted angrily, Yang Tian, what on earth are you doing? Yang Tian said innocently, Professor, the battle between the snake and lion houses has caused casualties. I have been helping to treat my classmates. Professor, you see how exhausted I am. In order to treat my classmates, I have consumed more than 10 gold galleons of magic potions. Moreover, it was at cost price. Elena gnashed her teeth and said, are you helping your classmates? You are fanning the flames on both sides, afraid that they won't be beaten badly enough. Senior, I don't like what you said. Yang Tian pretended to be dissatisfied and said, look at this huge auditorium. Tell me if anyone is seriously injured. Elena looked back after hearing this, then looked at herself again, and suddenly became even more angry. It seemed that she was the most miserable one in the whole audience. She was so angry. Professor McGonagall quickly tried to smooth things over and vented Elena's anger, saying, you can't tease your senior like this. Apologize to Elena now. Chapter 129. End and Doubt. Hearing this, Yang Tian looked even more aggrieved. Professor, you are really wronging me. I admit that when the Weasley brothers attacked me at the beginning, I fought back in self-defense and accidentally hit the senior sister, but it was really unintentional. It was too sudden and I couldn't react at all. But the senior sister kept chasing me and beating me. I ran all the way. It was so miserable. I couldn't just take the beating without fighting back, right? And I only used the water spell to fight back. The other moves had nothing to do with me. Elena has always been disdainful of arguing, but the anger in her eyes at this moment seemed to be determined to burn Yang Tian to death. The Weasley brothers who were implicated immediately refused to take it anymore. George was the first to speak up, Yang Tian, don't talk nonsense in front of Professor McGonagall. We definitely didn't attack you. What's the point of self-defense and counterattack? Don't flatter yourself, okay? Fred also said immediately, that's right, what do you mean it's just a water spell? Is that a water spell? Is there a water spell that can knock someone down? Hey, you two, stop pretending to know what you don't know. How can this be? Seeing that the scene was beginning to get chaotic again, Professor McGonagall made a prompt decision and said, okay, today's matter ends here. Regarding the large-scale fight between Gryffindor and Slytherin, the school will discuss it and give a final result. And you, Yang Tian, why are you always there wherever there is excitement? Can't you just stop worrying about it? You can't escape what happened today, just wait for your punishment. Yang Tian's face was completely broken, and he struggled helplessly, it's unfair, Professor. I just came here to eat early in the morning and heal a classmate's injury. I have nothing to do here. Professor McGonagall, I have made contributions to Hogwarts, I have shed blood for Hogwarts, you can't do this to me, I want to see the headmaster. Those extremely miserable and funny words made everyone present laugh uncontrollably. Professor McGonagall's face darkened as well. She tapped Yang Tian's head lightly with her wand to vent her anger before she shouted to everyone, what are you waiting for? Everyone, go away and get ready for class. Then he turned to Elena and whispered, Ms. Shafik, I'll give you a privilege. Find a deserted place and beat this kid up to vent your anger. Of course, the premise is that he can't be hurt. After saying that, he looked at Yang Tian hatefully. Hearing this, Yang Tian's jaw almost dropped. Is this still Professor McGonagall who treats him like a treasure? When he thought of this, he looked at the professor with resentment, bowed his head like a bullied wife, and then, before anyone could react, he flew out on his somersault cloud. He kept calling out, Hermione, Neville, and the rest of you heartless people. What are you doing? Come to class with me. From today on, we'll stay together. I just want to see if this deserted place is easy to find. He was still talking, but he had already disappeared. Seeing that there was nothing exciting to watch, everyone at the scene also dispersed. However, no one at the scene noticed that as early as when the little snakes and the little lions started to fight, there were two figures at the corner of the third floor who had been observing the development of the situation. After everyone had left, one of them smiled and said, What do you think, Severus? Are you willing to accept my advice and have a frank talk with this child? Snape was silent for a long time before he said, Dumbledore, are you beginning to admire this little devil? I can't say I admire him. After all, the resentment on the killing orb was so heavy that even we were deeply uneasy. He is a dangerous man. Dumbledore said lightly. Then you still? Snape asked dissatisfiedly. Severus, this child's series of performances at Hogwarts gave me an impulse. I want to give this child a chance to speak. We need the truth, don't we? Dumbledore said calmly. Snape sneered and said, Dumbledore, are you so sure that what he said is the truth? You know, the human heart is the most unpredictable. How do you know that he won't use some means to deceive you? After all, we are not familiar with Eastern witchcraft. Dumbledore was silent for a long time before he finally said, I have to say, you have convinced me. Let's observe for a while. He obviously didn't want to waste any more time on this issue, so he changed the subject and said, by the way, Severus. Have you read the letter sent from the Ministry of Magic this morning? What do you think? Feelings? What feelings can I have? If I must say something, are the people in the Ministry of Magic crazy? Our wizards are still enduring the sneak attacks of a mysterious organization and no one cares. But more than 100 muggles died last night, and the Ministry of Magic is demanding a thorough investigation? Could it be that our beloved Minister Fudge has already started serving the Muggle government? Snape sprayed venom wantonly. I have to say that Minister Fudge is not having an easy time right now. He just took over last year, and his control over the Ministry of Magic is already insufficient. Now that he has encountered such a difficult matter, it is understandable that he is cautious. After all, a random decision of his may lead to catastrophic consequences. The wizarding world needs stability so much right now. Dumbledore made excuses for Fudge at the right time. Come on, Dumbledore, peace will not come from blindly giving in. Stop deceiving yourself. Take a look at this ridiculous report. A group of more than 20 wizards attacked 4 Muggle gathering places in succession, killing more than 100 innocent Muggles. This is the funniest joke I have ever heard in my life. You know, any dark wizard can kill more than 100 people silently. What are the other 20 or so wizards doing? Snape continued to mock. It's better not to judge too early. We don't know the specific situation at all, and we can't speculate on the details. Dumbledore was about to persuade him, but after thinking about it, he said, forget it, I will send a letter to Fudge later. This matter is indeed a bit too much. Snape obviously lost interest in talking. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, Dumbledore's words came again, Severus, where is the killing bead you borrowed from Madame Longbottom? Take it out and let us see it. Snape was visibly stunned and asked, how did you know? Dumbledore did not reply, but just looked at him with a smile on his face. Snape no longer hesitated. He drew out his wand and pointed it into the hall. He saw a transparent round ball suddenly jump out from under the Ravenclaw table and shoot towards the two of them. The place where the ball jumped out was exactly Yang Tian's regular seat. Dumbledore caught the flying ball in his hand and observed it carefully, muttering as he looked at it, there is no spirit of resentment. Alas, it seems that I thought too much. Snape, who was somewhat confused by the headmaster's series of actions, suddenly opened his eyes wide and said in horror, you don't suspect that what happened last night was related to that little devil? How could you have such a ridiculous idea? Dumbledore shook his head helplessly and said, it was just a sudden thought. The facts prove that I was wrong. Then he reset the ball. Snape said nothing more, and the two of them fell into their own thoughts. At this moment, Yang Tian, who had already walked away with his friends, suddenly turned back and smiled confidently at the scene of the incident. Chapter 130. Two women struggle to survive. After the famous breakfast brawl, Hogwarts was destined to be lively today. Elena Shafik, the enhanced water spell, and Yang Tian became the topic of conversation for the young wizards. In and out of class, after dinner, everyone was happily imitating and telling stories. This joyful atmosphere did not stop until the young wizards fell asleep. In sharp contrast to this is a girls' dormitory in Slytherin. It was late at night and everyone was asleep, but Daphne and Pansy were still sitting opposite each other, neatly dressed. They looked at the time and at each other from time to time. Pansy, are we never going to escape the clutches of the devil again? Daphne groaned in pain before she finished her words. She barely held on for a moment before she began to mutter. We really deserve to die. It is my greatest honor to follow the master. We should not have the heart to resist. We just haven't adapted to our new identity yet. These words seemed to warn Pansy, but also seemed to hypnotize herself. As time passed, Daphne's face actually showed a trace of piety. Pansy felt a sudden palpitation in her heart when she saw the scene in front of her, but she still said stubbornly, "We must get through it. I have a feeling that if we really fall completely this time, we can't afford the consequences." Before she finished speaking, the painful groaning phenomenon reappeared on Pansy. This girl was obviously more rebellious. She gritted her teeth and stood firm without saying a word. However, because of the increasing horrible pain in the depths of her soul, she finally lost. Soon, Pansy also started to mutter. About half an hour later, the two women seemed to have returned to normal. Daphne said unwillingly again, "What kind of power is this? It was better for us to talk to each other. But in just 2 days, every time I thought about telling our experience to a third person, my soul would tremble, my body would feel like it was being tortured, and I would eventually lose myself. I really can't stand it anymore. Can't I even think about it?" She was already sobbing at the end. But the sobbing did not bring good luck to Daphne. Painful groans and devout mumblings came as expected. Pansy said hatefully, "What's that?" "I deliberately controlled my thoughts, and after countless plans and countless heart-wrenching pains, I wanted to expose his evil deeds in public in the potions class. But what greeted me? A completely uncontrollable body, deep pain in my bones, and torture in the deepest part of my soul." Before she could finish her words, a more shrill roar than before sounded again. After another half an hour of silence, Daphne's soft murmur suddenly rang out in the bedroom, "I should repent. How could I have such malice towards my master? I should be punished more severely. Daphne, you are such a wimp. Look at me, then look at yourself. Aren't you ashamed?" Before she could finish her words, extreme pain struck again. "Pansy, give up. The master is invincible, and we should be proud to serve the master. There is still an hour until the agreed time, and you can still lose your mind twice." Daphne's tone was cold and arrogant, and she regained the temperament of a lady from a big family. "Woo! Woo! Master, I was wrong, I repent, I was crazy again, I am extremely loyal to you. At least I am much more loyal than Daphne. Woo!" Half an hour later, Pansy's tone changed drastically. Her stubbornness was gone, and she just lowered her head and muttered like a frightened little animal. "Pansy, that's enough. You were just showing off your strength, and now you're showing off your humility. Are you schizophrenic? And why do you always drag me down in everything? You just called me a spineless person, and now you're more loyal than me. Don't you think this is ridiculous?" Daphne was so angry that her voice was shaking. Pansy was very ashamed and angry when she heard this. She retorted unhappily, "If you hadn't slandered the master in front of me all day long, would I have ended up like this? This is all your fault, and you should be punished. Have you said less than I have? Because of the unpleasantness with the host at the birthday party, you hold a grudge and slander him everywhere. Many of my words and deeds are influenced by you. You are the culprit." Daphne immediately hit back. "Daphne, you bastard, you dare to say that, I will fight you." Pansy drew out the wand from her waist. But before she could chant the spell, Daphne, who was close to her, threw the wand away. Daphne also wanted to draw her wand to fight back, but was stopped by Pansy's quick eyes and hands. Soon, the two women forgot their identities and turned the battle between wizards into a girls' fight with punches, kicks, and hair pulling. The battle between the two lasted for half an hour, and finally they fell down exhausted. Daphne hugged Pansy's left leg, and Pansy twisted Daphne's right arm. Slowly, the two separated tacitly, staring at each other in silence, but there was unspeakable grievance and regret in their eyes. After a long silence, Daphne finally broke the silence. She looked at the time and whispered, "Pansy, maybe you are right. I am a coward, but I am really tired. Maybe sinking is the best ending for me. Let's go. The master is waiting for us." Pansy adjusted her wizard robe silently, tears unconsciously falling from the corners of her eyes. "I'm not that much better, but luckily I have you by my side. No matter how dark the road is, I feel at ease." The two women smiled sadly at each other, and everything seemed to have changed at this moment. It was exactly 2 o'clock in the morning when Daphne and Pansy quietly left the Slytherin common room. As soon as the two women stood still, Yang Tian's gentle smile appeared in front of them. He did not let the two women speak, but directly cast an illusion spell for them, and then led the two women to the room of requirement. It was still the same cold hellish room, and the same devilish man. Daphne and Pansy were overwhelmed with emotions. But they suppressed their excitement and bowed respectfully, saying, "Master." Yang Tian nodded slightly and went straight to the point, "Has anything interesting happened in the past 2 days?" Daphne was the first to answer, "Master, in order to ease the relationship with Draco, Blaise publicly supported Draco to become the leader of the first year of Slytherin. Draco also praised Blaise for this. The two of them are currently on a very close relationship." Pansy continued, "Master, Blaise asked us yesterday to find a way to lead everyone in the study group to the Forbidden Forest, but you are not included." Daphne continued, "Master, Blaise has been trying to get close to Marcus these past 2 days. The reason is currently unknown." Yang Tian gradually gathered and mastered the information from the two women's reports. When the two women finished their reports, Yang Tian looked at them with a lingering feeling, a faint blue light in his eyes. But after thinking about it, he stopped. If he forcefully read their memories now, the two women might strengthen their will to resist the soul seeds, which would be a bad thing. It would be better to wait for a few days. When the two women are completely assimilated by the soul seeds, they will no longer have any secrets. Thinking of this, Yang Tian raised his lips slightly and said, "Your report is quite comprehensive. I am still very pleased." The two women quickly bowed and said, "It is our greatest honor to share the master's worries." Yang Tian ignored their expressions of loyalty and frowned, saying, "But your abilities and character are so far behind. Daphne and Pansy, you two are descendants of the sacred 28 families, and you should be at the top of the wizarding world. But why are you isolated in Slytherin?" Seeing the two girls' terrified expressions, Yang Tian continued, "My request is very simple. In the days ahead, you must organize your own supporters in Slytherin. If anyone dares to strike you back, you must fight back. If anyone dares to speak out, you must scold them back. Also, you must put on a big show at breakfast tomorrow." Chapter 131. Warm up before the show. In the morning, Yang Tian got out of bed with strong willpower. Last night's meeting with Daphne and Pansy took up too much time. But even if he got up reluctantly, he was still not in good spirits. If he hadn't been thinking about the big show that was about to take place in the auditorium, he might have gone back to sleep. The friends came early, and they were already eating breakfast together. Of course, the most central position was still reserved for Yang Tian. Seeing this, Yang Tian patted his face and tried to cheer himself up, then quickly joined in and started eating heartily. Potions, transfiguration, herbs, everything related to magic was the eternal topic in the group, and everyone ate and talked, having a great time. As time went by, more and more young wizards came to have breakfast, and the hall gradually became noisy. The daily routine of owl delivery also arrived as scheduled. But unlike in the past, the owl team delivering letters today was extremely large, and countless owls flew directly towards Yang Tian and his friends. The letters fell like raindrops, almost burying everyone. Yang Tian helplessly used the ancient magic wand to raise a light curtain to intercept the letter. He secretly complained that the wave of letters from today's transfiguration had not completely passed, so what was going on today? He didn't even need to look for the answer himself. Hermione was already holding a magazine and exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, Yang Tian's academic paper on the improvement of dictamni cultivation methods has been published in the journal Amazing Nature. It's amazing. Wow, our names are actually in the assistant column." Hearing this, Yang Tian suddenly realized and couldn't help but smile. When it comes to this kind of academic pursuit, Hermione is definitely the most persistent one. The friends in the study group were also very excited to hear the news. They grabbed the magazines and looked for their names. When they found their names, they laughed and then clapped their hands to celebrate. After all, they also worked hard here. Well, the one who has contributed the most here is Professor Sprout. After all, I only proposed a plan, and most of the specific cultivation work and data accumulation were done by the professor. But I approached her several times to ask for CO signing, but she refused no matter what. I think she feels very guilty. Yang Tian said with emotion. I can understand the professor's intentions. If you CO sign the paper, it will dilute a lot of your credit. After all, you are too young. But you don't have to worry too much. The professor is now a well-known expert in herbology and does not need a paper like this to enhance his reputation. Hermione said seriously. The other friends also rushed to comfort him. The little wizards in the auditorium gradually figured out what happened, and they all looked at Yang Tian with admiration, and were envious of Yang Tian's friends. How many times has this noble and handsome boy caused a sensation in the outside world? How many times will it happen in the future? Everyone didn't dare to think about it anymore. At this moment, 2 more owls attracted everyone's attention because the items they were transporting were very large. Although most of the items were wrapped in dust bags, it could still be judged from their appearance that they were 2 flying brooms. The owls circled slightly above the hall, then swooped down towards Yang Tian and the others. When they got close, the 2 owls released their claws almost at the same time, and the 2 items fell into the hands of Yang Tian and Zhang Qiu respectively. Yang Tian was unpacking the items calmly, while Zhang Qiu looked at a loss. Fortunately, with the help of Penelope, the full appearance of the items was quickly presented to everyone. It's actually a Nimbus 2000. Roger Davis, the captain of the Ravenclaw football team, rushed over first. Upon hearing this, the people nearby also rushed over quickly and looked at it like curious babies. The smooth and shiny streamlined design, the mahogany handle, and the long, straight and neat broom end all demonstrate its superior performance. At the front end of the broom, the golden dyed Lightwheel 2000 also confirms Roger's statement. What? Nimbus 2000? It's really the Nimbus 2000. I heard that the brooms in the Nimbus series are limited edition items, and the Nimbus 2000 was only released not long ago. The surrounding little wizards also saw the full appearance of the broom, and Roger and other knowledgeable little wizards gave everyone relevant knowledge. Zhang Qiu's mood has been fluctuating since the flying broom fell into her hands. At this moment, she was looking at Yang Tian with a conflicted expression, as if she wanted to say something but hesitated. Yang Tian knew what Zhang Qiu was thinking as soon as he saw her expression. His handsome face drooped quickly, and he said in a voice that only the 2 of them could hear, "You keep saying that I protected you in the past, and you will protect me in the future. You don't even dare to ask for a flying broom. I think the protection period is also very limited." Zhang Qiu's face fell immediately after hearing this. Although she couldn't understand what the direct relationship was between accepting the Lightwheel 2000 and her promise, she could still see that Yang Tian was unhappy. However, the little girl thought about it and felt relieved. She had already decided on some things, and the flying broom was really nothing. She just accepted it, and let others say whatever they wanted. Thinking of this, Zhang Qiu pretended to be angry and snorted, then he excitedly fumbled with the Nimbus 2000 in his hand, and for a moment he was reluctant to let it go. More and more little wizards gathered to watch the fun, and the atmosphere was extremely lively. But at this moment, a slightly trembling but joyful voice sounded, suppressing the surrounding noise. The Hogwarts admission letter clearly states that first-year students are not allowed to bring broomsticks privately, but he openly violated the school rules. Harry, do you see his true face? Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Ron Weasley spitting heavily as he expressed his ideas. Before Yang Tian could reply, Zhang Qiu jumped up in anger, pinched his waist and shouted angrily, "Yang Tian is a regular player of our Ravenclaw Quidditch team, and was personally recommended by our dean, Professor Flitwick. You know nothing, so what right do you have to talk nonsense?" Yang Tian was already very impatient at this time. He jumped off the somersault cloud and walked straight towards Ron and Harry. Ron, who was retorted, had his eyes wide open with a look of disbelief. Seeing Yang Tian's unfriendly expression, he stammered and dared not speak. Yang Tian raised his head proudly and looked at Ron with contempt. After making Ron extremely uncomfortable, Yang Tian spoke in a cold tone, "Tell me, how many times? You are very hostile to me." Ron looked around with a guilty conscience, but still defended himself stubbornly, I didn't, I just... No need to explain." Yang Tian interrupted Ron's defense forcefully and continued in a cold voice, "There are no fools here. From the first day of school to now, it has happened several times. Give me a reason." Harry anxiously defended himself, "Yang Tian, believe me, this is just a misunderstanding. Ron is just sensitive about violations of school rules. He should have no ill will towards you." Although the words sounded nice, his tone was indescribably guilty. Yang Tian was unmoved and asked pointedly, "Are you more sensitive to violations of school rules? Would such a righteous student laugh at his teacher for no reason?" "Harry, from the first day of school to now, you have experienced many things personally. I believe there should be many more when I was not there. I hope you can speak with your conscience. Chapter 132. How to make a good child. Harry lowered his head in shame at the righteous words. No one knew better than him that Ron had been madly complaining about Yang Tian since the first day of school, at least once a day. The intensity of his complaints was even greater than that of their other archenemy, Draco Malfoy. But the problem was that Yang Tian had never had any contact with them. Harry also asked Ron the reason why he disliked Yang Tian, but he didn't expect that what Ron got in return was anger, dissatisfaction, and sadness. In short, if you don't dislike him as much as I do, you just don't believe me, which made Harry speechless. But as his best and even only good friend, Harry still tried his best to accommodate Ron's harmless little problem. But today, when everything was laid out in the open, Harry could not help but be speechless. Yang Tian's sharp words and Harry's awkward silence directly irritated Ron. Thinking about his most embarrassing moment, which was also his biggest scar, being torn open without any scruples by this man named Yang Tian and presented in front of everyone, Ron was furious. How could Yang Tian be so vicious? He is definitely not a good guy. He had apparently forgotten his own aggressiveness or thought that everything he had done should be forgiven. Ron's face was flushed at this moment, as if he felt greatly humiliated. He drew out his wand tremblingly, not knowing whether he was too excited or frightened. Ron pointed his wand downwards, striking what he thought was the coolest pose, and said in a trembling voice, "Yang, how dare you insult Weiss, mmmmm, mmmmm, mmmmm." Before he could finish his words, George and Fred blocked his mouth. The two brothers even held up Ron's arms and dragged him back desperately. Fred said anxiously, "Yang Tian, you know my little brother is always silly and likes to act crazy for no reason, just like last time," he yelled and screamed at us two brothers. "Don't bother with him." George immediately smiled and said, "We are natural partners in pranks. We must not let this idiot affect our relationship. It's meaningless." Angelina also hurried to Yang Tian's right side, tightly holding down Yang Tian's hand as he was about to draw out the wand, with obvious dissuasion in her eyes. At this moment, Lee Jordan also jumped out and said enthusiastically, "Hey, brother, you are Yang Tian, right? I have heard of your name for a long time, but I have never chatted with you. Today is a rare opportunity." After saying that, he grabbed Yang Tian's hand in a familiar manner and shook it exaggeratedly. Then he continued to compliment him. "Just now I heard that you have joined the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. Merlin, this is unbelievable. You have become the only first-year student selected in Hogwarts so far. Today is a memorable day, don't get angry because of these little misunderstandings. The little lions of Gryffindor are looking forward to playing with you." It must be said that the exaggerated tone and attitude did not cause any disgust among the onlookers, and the rather solemn atmosphere just now was also relaxed. Yang Tian was shocked when he saw this scene. This is a master. He defined the situation with just a few simple words. If he continued to pursue the matter, it would easily cause dissatisfaction among the little Gryffindor wizards. Yang Tian, who has lived two lives, is naturally not a pushover. He first patted Angelina gently and gave her a reassuring look. Then he smiled and said to Lee Jordan, "You are our Hogwarts Quidditch commentator, right? Nice to meet you, but now that we know each other, we are friends, so we have to make a deal. When you commentate on the match between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, you can't be biased towards your own house, otherwise it would be unfriendly." Lee Jordan heard this and said righteously, "How could it be? I am the most professional commentator and would never do such a thing." Yang Tian smiled like a fox and said, "Okay, I'll ask my friends to write down your entire explanation and then I'll use the evidence to speak for myself." Lee Jordan was suddenly a little embarrassed and said, This. Yang Tian patted his shoulder again, and then walked to the Weasley brothers. Looking at the slightly embarrassed twin brothers and the angry Ron, Yang Tian smiled mischievously, put his arms around the brothers' shoulders and said, "George, Fred, we three have similar tempers. If someone from Slytherin talks to you, will you beat them up? They are all newcomers, so why should we spoil them? Don't you agree?" The two brothers thought about it and immediately responded, "That's right, if he dares to cause trouble with us, we should beat him up. That's what happened in the fight a few days ago." Then they thought about the current situation and looked embarrassed again. Yang Tian didn't care and continued to hug her shoulders and said, "If we talk about what happened today, you two are the ones who should reflect on yourself the most." The Weasley brothers were stunned when they heard this and said unconvincedly, what does this have to do with us? Because their attention was drawn by Yang Tian's words, the two brothers unconsciously loosened their hands. Yang Tian took advantage of the situation and pulled the two brothers side by side, saying as they walked, "We have an old saying in China, that the eldest brother is like a father. As the older brothers, you are just like a father. If you see your younger brother doing something wrong, you have to educate him." Fred became interested, but soon said dejectedly, "It's not as simple as you say. My stupid brother doesn't listen at all, okay?" Yang Tian added as if he had expected it, "Then you have to remember another old Chinese saying, which is that a good son is born under the stick. If he doesn't obey, beat him up." George asked doubtfully, "Is that true? Mom will say we are bullying our brother." Yang Tian continued, "How can this be called bullying? Haven't you heard of an old Chinese saying, cut down small trees and discipline children? And if your mother really says that about you, you should reason with her and tell her that loving mothers often spoil their children, tell her that strictness is love, while leniency is harm, and that if you don't discipline or care about them, they will become bad." Thus, a Chinese culture education lesson was launched for George and Fred. The three of them ate and chatted at the Ravenclaw table. The Weasley brothers nodded seriously from time to time, looking quite serious in agreement. The onlookers were laughing like crazy. They listened carefully to the speeches of the three people, afraid of missing any funny moments. Ron was completely confused. His original anger had been replaced by shock. He stared blankly at the direction of the three people's chat with his mouth wide open. He simply couldn't believe that everything that was happening before his eyes was real. At this moment, he could only silently accept the pitying looks from everyone. The discordant interludes were always short-lived, and the lively discussion soon filled the hall again, even more joyful than before. But today was destined not to be peaceful. Just when everyone was chatting happily, two proud figures leisurely walked into the hall and headed towards the Slytherin table. This scene immediately attracted Yang Tian's attention, because the big show he had arranged was finally about to begin. Chapter 133. The drama begins. The appearance of Daphne and Pansy at the Slytherin table naturally attracted the attention of the little snakes. The surrounding little snakes showed contempt and gloating looks. Especially the girls in the lower grades, who were whispering loudly, as if they were afraid that the two girls couldn't hear them. Their sarcastic remarks were almost pointing at their noses and scolding them. After making indirect accusations, the girls looked at Pansy and Daphne provocatively with sidelong glances, and then giggled non-stop, looking fearless. However, today the two girls' performance was bound to surprise everyone. They did not pretend to be deaf and dumb as usual, nor did they sit down quietly to eat. Instead, they walked straight towards the gossiping girls. Before they could react, Pansy grabbed the leading girl by the collar and slapped her twice. Several girls were stunned, and the little snakes around them were also stunned. Everyone was stunned on the spot, but after they were stunned, dissatisfaction and doubts suddenly flowed, and there were voices of doubt all around. The leading girl screamed in disbelief, "How dare you!" But before he could finish his words, Pansy slapped him twice. Daphne's cold words followed, "Cecilia Adams, I want to ask you, how dare you? How dare a small pure-blood family of only a few generations to mock the daughters of the Parkinson and Greengrass families, who are among the 28 sacred families? Who gave you the courage?" Before he finished speaking, the voices of doubt around him quieted down, and the women who had just ridiculed the two men were even more shocked. Pansy didn't intend to let it go so easily. She scanned the surroundings with a fierce gaze before she said coldly, "Father asked me how I could be so cowardly and bring shame to the Parkinson family. All of this is caused by you." In anger, he slapped Cecilia twice, but his eyes were still looking around, as if he was looking for his next target. Daphne continued leisurely, "The Addams family is so powerful. I remember that their main source of income is growing feed for some magical animals, right? Pansy, there's no need for the family to step in. The two of us can take out some pocket money and set up a plantation. I want to see who else buys the Addams family's goods." At the end, her eyes had become extremely sharp. Cecilia's whole body trembled when she heard this. She had actually brought such a disaster to her family. She looked at the snakes around her for help, hoping to get support, but what she saw was that the people who had just been making trouble were trying to avoid it, and some people even showed expressions of gloating. At this moment, Cecilia realized that she had become someone else's pawn. She knelt down in despair, hugged Pansy's legs tightly with both hands and begged, "Dear Miss Parkinson, dear Miss Greengrass, I apologize for my ignorant words and deeds. I know that no matter what I say, it will be pale and powerless, and I will not be easily forgiven. But I want to say that from today on, I am willing to be your most loyal follower. In the days to come, your will be the direction I move forward. No matter who I face, I will be the sharpest knife and the strongest shield. I only ask that you can let my family go." After saying this, Cecilia humbly prostrated herself before Pansy and Daphne. The two women looked at each other, and Daphne raised her left hand slightly and said, "As you wish, Cecilia Adams. I hope you can keep your vows today." Cecilia felt relieved and sobbed with excitement. Pansy's cold words rang out again, "It doesn't matter if she has forgotten the oath. The Parkinson family is powerful enough to make her remember it again." After saying that, he looked around again. But almost no one among the little snakes dared to look at him. Cecilia trembled all over when she heard that and lowered her head even lower. Pansy suddenly stopped looking and focused her gaze on Blaise, who had a complicated expression on his face. "And you, Blaise Zabinai, you are responsible for everything that happened today. I'll give you 3 days to restore our sister's reputation by any means. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences." Bryce's expression changed. He obviously didn't expect that the fire would burn him. He asked unnaturally, "What do you two mean? What does this have to do with me? What happened?" Daphne said coldly, "You have made a clean excuse. Unfortunately, you can't get away this time. Today we both received letters from our father, questioning us about the details of how we brought shame upon our family. Blaise Zabinai, the interests of our family are above all else, you should understand that." Blaise was really surprised this time. He really didn't expect things to escalate so quickly and violently. He still tried his best to be friendly and graceful, but the panic could not escape Yang Tian's sight. Finally, Blaise fixed his eyes on Draco Malfoy for help. Draco, who received the distress signal, looked at Pansy and Daphne with a complicated expression. The performance of these two girls today was beyond his expectations. He stood up and wanted to say something, but before he could open his mouth, Pansy's cold words came first. "Draco, my father told me in the letter, the honor of the family cannot be tarnished. If someone wants to hit the Parkinson family in the face, then hit them back hard. As the eldest son of the Malfoy family who is allied with the Parkinson family, I suggest you write a letter to communicate with your father and then express your position." Draco was startled and looked at Pansy seriously, and only hurried forward after confirming that the girl had no intention of joking. He straightened his wizard robe solemnly and said politely, "I understand, Pansy. Perhaps because you are too young, you have taken some children's quarrels to an inappropriate level. I will immediately inform father of the cause and effect of this incident and review my mistakes. But please believe that the Malfoy family has always been the Parkinson family's most solid ally, and this has never changed." After saying this, he solemnly performed a chest-touching salute, then left with Goyle and Crab, with a heavy heart. The snakes around them gradually dispersed, and Blaise quietly left in the chaos. The two women completely ignored the changes around them and ate their breakfast. Cecilia stood respectfully behind the two women, serving them attentively, but her eyes were glaring at those who had just gloated over their misfortune. Snape stared at the Slytherin house table with a complicated expression, but he didn't say a word. This is the unique culture of Slytherin, isn't it? After watching such a big show, Yang Tian began to eat slowly again. He was very satisfied with this big show, and it was worth his overnight planning. The two girls communicated with the family through letters overnight. More importantly, don't think this is the end, the best is yet to come. With this thought in mind, Yang Tian ate even more happily. Chapter 134, There is a Scouting Army. After finishing breakfast, Yang Tian stood up with great pride, only to see Captain Roger still talking nonsense about the various data parameters of the Nimbus 2000. In a good mood, he couldn't help but ask, "Captain, don't we have another run in training before the game? When does it start?" Unexpectedly, Roger, who was spitting just now, suddenly froze and said awkwardly, "We have already run in very well in the last training, and now we have 2 Nimbus 2000s. What's the point of training? We can just compete directly on Saturday." Yang Tian was stunned. Could this captain be fake? Before, every time this guy saw him, he would complain about him not training. Why did he suddenly change his attitude now? Little did he know that these days, the entire Ravenclaw team was worried about practicing with Yang Tian again. For this reason, they went to Roger to talk again and again. The core idea is that other members of our team should just practice, Yang Tian's time is precious, and he should not waste it on Quidditch training. In fact, the players don't know that their captain Roger is also afraid. This can't be blamed on Roger and his team members. It was just that the memory was too horrible and Yang Tian's performance was too brutal. Although everyone recovered the next day because of Yang Tian's medicine. But the feeling of exhaustion and tearing after training still tortured them for the whole night, the feeling of powerlessness of trying their best but still not being able to keep up with the pace hurt every Ravenclaw team member. Of course, there was also the feeling of being attacked by Yang Tian's poisonous tongue and not having the face to fight back. In short, only those who have experienced that feeling know it. Thinking of this, Roger slapped his forehead and said, "Oh no, something terrible has happened. I forgot to do my history of magic homework. This is terrible. I won't chat with you guys anymore. I'm going to find a quiet place to finish my homework." After saying that, he rushed out in a hurry, not even bothering to take off his shoes. The little wizards burst into laughter when they saw this. During the next 2 days, Hogwarts was in turmoil. On the afternoon of the day of the incident, Draco brought Goyle and Crabbe to visit Pansy and Daphne in a very grand and formal public manner, expressing the family's most sincere condolences to the two women. He also said that both the family behind them and themselves would be the two women's eternal friends and strong support. Such a shocking scene was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, and the balance was completely broken. In the following days, the young wizards of Slytherin came one after another, expressing their support for the two girls on behalf of their respective families, and many senior students also expressed their concern for the two girls. For a while, Blaise Zabinai's name was pushed to the forefront, and everyone seemed to be waiting for his latest statement. Yang Tian was naturally happy to see this happen. However, he was not idle either. Without anyone noticing, a large number of Cara-blind snakes and unicorn snails came out of the suitcase. In fact, it was purely accidental that he had such a large army. Before coming to Hogwarts to study, Yang Tian was naturally worried about leaving his little pets at Foley Manor, so he simply put them all in the suitcase on the third underground floor and brought them here, including 2 common land animals that he had portrayed in his early years, the unicorn-horned gastropod snail and the Cara-blind snake. After that, although he often used magical creatures such as Half Moon and 2 Years, he had forgotten about ordinary animals. But what he didn't expect was that the blood pool in the 3rd floor and these 2 ordinary animals gave him a huge shock. 2 days ago, when he went to the 4th floor of the suitcase to study the hexagram, he was really shocked by the earthworms and snails everywhere. I don't know what the principle of this blood pool is, but it can greatly stimulate the reproduction of the 2 species. In such a short period of time, I don't know how many generations have been reproduced. But this blood pool can't achieve such an effect on magical animals. How smart is Yang Tian? Isn't he a natural spy? Especially this Cara-blind snake, as the smallest snake in nature, it is not even as big as a gold galleon. It looks no different from an earthworm, right? Now that the Slytherin incident has become so serious, how could these hidden culprits not pass on the news? Therefore, the little earthworms and snails lay leisurely on the roads that might convey messages. Even in the common rooms of several colleges, with the help of their friends, these little creatures were brought in and lurked in the shadows. The castle was strictly guarded inside and outside. With the help of the Marauder's map, Yang Tian didn't believe that he couldn't uncover all the culprits in Hogwarts. Yang Tian has even planned that after this incident is over, he will throw the fire ash snakes with super breeding ability into the Forbidden Forest. This is also where the fighter formation comes into play. But ideals are full, but reality is very skinny. Yang Tian's arrangements were very thorough. But late that night, except for Blaise Zabinai himself who quietly released the owl with the letter tied to it, no other shady hands took action. When Yang Tian received the report from his spies, he was completely stunned. Was Bryce abandoned? Or was it a special way of contacting someone during a special period? Fortunately, when the owl disappeared into the night, Meng Meng Jiao's figure was far behind it. In the early hours of the morning, on a towering tree outside the long row of 2-story European-style houses in Manchester University Town, a crow was jumping aimlessly on the branches, while looking at the house not far away from time to time. A moment later, another crow landed on the same branch, causing the branch to tremble. The new crow cackled twice, then hopped around, looking for something. At this moment, a male voice as soft as a mosquito suddenly came out of the new crow's mouth. "Xiaohu, you go back and rest first, I will take over. Oh, by the way, was there anything unusual last night? The crow that was originally perched on the tree also spoke in human language, its voice just as small. Everything is normal, big brother. But should we report to the young master? We have been following them here for a while, but they seem to have only a single line of communication with one location. I think it's time to close the net. The crow, who was called the big brother, was unmoved and said, "Don't be anxious, Xiao, be patient. I always feel that this base is not as simple as it looks. Let's keep an eye on it for 3 more days." As the two were discussing, a dark brown owl quickly flew towards the house they were following. As the two were about to move forward, they saw Meng Jiao following him from a distance. "It's the young master's Saker falcon. It looks like something big has happened," Xiao Wu said. The eldest brother made a prompt decision upon hearing this, and used his crow's mouth to peck at a tree hole. A moment later, 3 more crows landed on the treetops. About half an hour later, 3 owls flew out of the house without warning. They circled and then quickly separated, each flying in a different direction. Seeing the scene before their eyes, 3 of the 5 crows seemed to have a tacit understanding. They each found a target and followed it from a distance. Chapter 135. In Hogwarts Castle, it was the beginning of another busy day. Yang Tian was about to wash up and go downstairs for breakfast, but he unexpectedly received a letter from Meng Jiao. After reading the letter, Yang Tian's face was extremely wonderful. Because this letter was the reconnaissance report on the 5 idiots in the mirror forwarded by old Xia. This report not only had a detailed text description, but also came with a large amount of video material. According to the report, the main contact line of this Manchester University city base turned out to be a children's welfare home in Gwynedd, Northern Wales. After tracking and squatting, the 5 idiots identified this welfare home as highly dangerous. The children's welfare home is located in a remote area. The building is a classical 2-story house that looks a bit dilapidated, with red bricks and brown tiles, and black and white windows. It is surrounded by a circle of tall iron fences, which looks extremely eerie. The report pointed out that this welfare home was very scary. Trucks would transport the bodies of children late at night every day. Every morning there would be physical training with an intensity comparable to that of adult soldiers. Every noon there would be competitions using daggers, iron rods, and standard fighting skills, etc. Yang Tian was horrified when he saw this. You know, according to the prediction of the 5 idiots, the children who received training were probably less than 10 years old. The reason why this place is classified as highly dangerous is that when the 5 idiots who transformed into crows tried to get close for reconnaissance, they were covered by a combined firepower network of guns, bows and crossbows, and magic spells. If they hadn't been experienced in reconnaissance and pretended to be dead, they probably wouldn't have been able to come back. They even shot down passing birds, so you can imagine how dangerous it was. At the same time, the report also mentioned the changes brought about by the Hogwarts owl delivery. The destinations of the 3 owls are very interesting. The first one, without a doubt, went to the children's welfare home. The second one was actually in Nocturne Alley. Yang Tian looked at the address and his expression became even more exciting, because this address was less than 200 meters away from Nightmare's hiding place. The destination of the third owl is the most interesting, that is Mrs. Zabanai's manor. At that time, the 4th of the 5 idiots in the mirror went to follow the owl and ran into a spy from the Free family who was following Mrs. Zabanai. If it weren't for the family identification marks, there would have been a misunderstanding. Obviously, Mrs. Zabanai's identity as Sarek could not be escaped. After studying the reconnaissance report again and again, Yang Tianke put it into his white jade ring. But at this time, he was secretly calculating in his heart. Perhaps it was the previous soul torture, or the erosion of the black energy, that made Yang Tian's heart harden a little. He scanned the video materials in the report, and the bloody darkness in it was enough to shock people. So, should he give his friends a shocking education, another baptism of fire, and tie everyone to his chariot completely? Even though they are just 11-year-old little wizards who grew up in a greenhouse. But once this devilish idea came into his mind, he could no longer suppress it. This might be an opportunity, and he needed to plan it carefully. But before that, he should discuss the detailed plan with old Xia and the others. Just when Yang Tian was still thinking hard about his plan, Professor McGonagall suddenly appeared. She looked serious and worried. But when she saw Yang Tian approaching, she calmed down and said gently, "Yang Tian, Headmaster Dumbledore is waiting for you in the headmaster's office. You can go there now. The password is the licorice wand." Yang Tian was stunned when he heard this. What was Dumbledore doing? However, based on the principle that good fortune is not a disaster, and disaster is inevitable, he still respectfully agreed and walked towards the principal's office. Suddenly, Professor McGonagall's voice came again softly, "It seems that Madame Zabanai has come to the school to question you because of what happened between you and Blaise last time. You must be careful when dealing with it, and be sure to watch your words." Yang Tian's heart suddenly trembled. Sarek was making a move. He looked at Professor McGonagall with gratitude, but the professor encouraged him before he could speak, "Don't worry, Hogwarts will not let its students be treated unfairly. Go now." Yang Tian was very moved. After paying respect to Professor McGonagall, he left in a hurry. The roads in Hogwarts were indeed complicated, but Yang Tian, who possessed the somersault cloud, was very familiar with them. In just a few minutes, he had arrived at the principal's office, and after verifying the password, he pushed open the familiar door of the principal's office. Dumbledore sat at his desk with a calm expression, not saying a word, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. When Yang Tian saw Dumbledore, he was about to greet him, but he heard a charming voice coming from nowhere, "Hey, this is the Yang Tian who announced in Hogwarts that he would embarrass the eldest son of the Zabanai family, right?" The voice was gentle, but the words were as sharp as a knife. Yang Tian turned his head and saw a charming lady standing up from the sofa. Her every move exuded her unique beauty. Although she was accusing the other person of her behavior, her peach blossom eyes were slightly raised, and her eyes seemed to convey her feelings. She was really beautiful and moving. Yang Tian didn't care at first and just glanced at him casually, but the next moment, he frowned and looked at the other person carefully again, and finally he directly used the method of internal vision. Mrs. Zabanai was expecting a verbal battle from the other party at first, but after waiting for a long time, she was met with a blank stare from the other party, which reminded her of those stinky men who usually set their sights on her. She couldn't help but feel contemptuous, and looked at Dumbledore with a mocking look, as if she was laughing at why Dumbledore would side with such a little pervert. Dumbledore did not speak, but just looked at Yang Tian with surprise. For a moment, the entire principal's office was surprisingly quiet. It was Yang Tian who reacted first. After completing his inner vision, he looked at Madame Zabanai with clear eyes and said in a calm but shocking tone, "Madame Zabanai, you have been poisoned and cursed. Do you mind if I use Chinese traditional medicine to test you? Maybe I can cure you." Mrs. Zabanai was shocked when she heard this, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled and said, "What a joke you are, little friend. How could I be poisoned and cursed? Hehe, you are not trying to take advantage of your sister, are you? This is not something a child of your age should do. But what are you going to do? Are you going to hold my wrist? You are so mean. I have seen similar records in books." After saying that, he actually stretched out his hand. Yang Tian did not refute her words, but directly grabbed Mrs. Zabanai's wrist to feel her pulse, and at the same time activated the inner vision again. The pulse diagnosis took a long time. Although Mrs. Zabanai tried to hide it, she was very uneasy inside. She tried hard to observe the facial expression of the little boy in front of her, hoping to find even a slight change in it, but unfortunately, she returned in vain. Yang Tian's face was calm. Finally, Yang Tian let go of his pulse-checking hand, exhaled slightly, and then said solemnly, "How can I put it? Your body is like a powder keg right now, with 17 kinds of poisons and 13 kinds of curses, but it barely achieves a delicate balance. It's a very cruel method." Mrs. Zabanai felt her heart pounding, and she could no longer suppress the throbbing in her heart. Chapter 136. Taboo Secret. Although Mrs. Zabanai was shocked, she still tried her best to calm down and perform with all her strength. But she smiled charmingly and said, "Brother, you are really good at joking. You make it sound like it's true. If I didn't know my physical condition well, I would have almost believed it. Do you think I look sick?" After that, she turned around a few times on the spot, showing off her graceful figure. But then she changed the subject and said, "However, I am still very interested in the mysterious East. How about this, kid, since you are so confident, I will give you a chance to show off. Show me your Eastern healing skills, let me see your methods, maybe I will believe it." The contradictory remarks were made extremely naturally by this pretty woman, but they still sounded awkward no matter how you listened to them. Yang Tian didn't care. He smiled and said, "In a case like yours, the pathological reaction is very severe. Just take the poison for example. It will make your whole body feel numb and itchy all year round. At midnight every day, you will feel tingling pain all over your body. Not to mention the curse. I have nightmares every night and have trouble falling asleep. I also have intermittent convulsions that are getting more frequent and more intense. And you actually said I was kidding. However, Yang Tian also changed the subject and said, "It doesn't matter, show me your left arm, I will give you some confidence." Mrs. Zabanai's expression did not change at all after hearing this. She continued to smile sweetly and said, "Now I am even more certain that what you said is a lie. I don't have any of the symptoms you mentioned. I don't know who you learned this trick from, you little rascal." Having said that, it was obvious that Mrs. Zabanai was speaking with a different mind than she actually was. She had already impatiently rolled up her sleeves and extended her exposed left arm. Of course Yang Tian would not argue with her. He took out the 9-turn golden needle and immediately took action. His movements were as fast as lightning. Shang Yang, Xiao Shang, Hagu, Yangzi, Siju, Cookie, and Zhigu. 7 acupuncture points were acupunctured almost at the same time. If someone had the ability to see inside at this time, they would definitely be able to send out the greenwood element energy. After the energy entered the acupuncture points through the golden needles, the poison glands that had been entrenched on Mrs. Zabanai's left arm fled in all directions as if they had encountered a natural enemy, but were surrounded by the energy that emerged from the 7 acupuncture points at the same time. Then, the encirclement became tighter and tighter until it turned into a black-hearted green-skinned energy light ball that was deposited at the Shangyang A cup ointment. Mrs. Zabanai suddenly felt that her paralyzed left arm had regained sensation and the numbness and itching had completely disappeared, which made her extremely surprised. But then she frowned again, because her left index finger was now swollen and slightly numb and itchy, which made her realize that the poison had not been completely eliminated. Looking at Madame Zabanai, who was hesitant to speak, Yang Tian said frankly, "I told you just now that although your body is like a powder keg now, it has barely reached a delicate balance. If you want to treat it, you have to cure 17 poisons and 13 curses at the same time. Treatment of a single toxin will only break this balance and cause a greater backlash. You can't afford the consequences. So the poison is still in your body, but I have condensed it into a point. You should be able to feel it." Mrs. Zabanai's expression was extremely complicated when she heard this. She thought carefully for a long time, but the next moment she leaned forward and half knelt in front of Yang Tian. She even straightened her proud and soft body and smiled softly, "Why don't you give my sister a complete cure?" This scene made Dumbledore frown. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end he remained silent. Yang Tian didn't care about Mrs. Zabanai's pretense. He just leaned back in his chair leisurely, looking into the woman's eyes with a half-smile. Seeing that Yang Tian did not reply, Mrs. Zabanai's heart sank. After a brief thought, she smiled again and said, "My sister may have been a little presumptuous in coming here today. I believed some rumors before and misunderstood my brother. I believe that such a thing will not happen again in the future." Yang Tian finally stopped being silent after hearing this. Instead, he said solemnly, "Mrs. Zabanai, I can tell you one thing clearly. I can completely solve all the problems you have. The acupuncture I just gave you was just a token of my goodwill. But the question is, are you really sure that you are thinking carefully about the treatment and not acting on impulse?" Yang Tian's words were like a bolt from the blue, completely shocking Mrs. Zabanai. At this moment, she was panicking. This seemingly harmless boy seemed to know the taboo secret hidden in her heart. In fact, her life experience itself is a taboo secret. Mrs. Zabanai was originally a half-blood witch, but this was a secret known only to her and her mother. When Zabanai's mother was young, she fell in love with a boy next door and had a relationship with him, but the boy was just a muggle. This scandal enraged Zabanai's grandfather, and as a result, the muggle boy disappeared from Zabanai's mother's life. It is unknown whether he ran away or died. Grandfather even forced Zabanai's mother to marry another promising young wizard. But what they didn't know was that Zabanai's mother was already pregnant with a muggle boy's child, and she planned to take advantage of the situation and give birth to the child. So, everything went smoothly, the two quickly fell in love and got married, and little Zabanai was born not long after. Newborn Zabanai lives a happy life, with loving parents, a lot of wealth, and family glory. But the good times did not last long. The young wizard was blown to pieces during a magic experiment, and Zabanai's mother was left to raise little Zabanai alone. At the age of 11, Madame Zabanai entered Hogwarts as a student in Slytherin House. Because she was good at scheming, she built a huge network of connections in Slytherin. At that time, Mrs. Zabanai was also full of ambition and dreamed of making great achievements after graduation with her huge network of connections. However, she didn't expect that this was just the beginning of her nightmare. On a dark and windy night, a group of black-robed wizards rushed into their home and brought his biological father, an ordinary muggle. Listening to the quarrel between her biological parents, Mrs. Zabanai felt that her world collapsed. That stupid muggle father was chased by his grandfather and fell off a cliff, but luckily he survived. But he didn't think about looking for his lover, but became completely decadent. He drank all day, and when he was drunk, he boasted everywhere that his woman was a witch. At first, everyone thought he was just talking nonsense. But after years, he was still targeted by someone with ulterior motives. When the black-robed wizards came to him, the so-called biological father did not struggle much, and brought these evil people to the mother and daughter just for £100. Seeing the cowardly father who was eager to take the money and leave, the mother completely collapsed. After killing the beast with her magic wand, she stood there like an idiot, as if everything around her had nothing to do with her anymore. Chapter 137. The drama ends. After watching this farce with laughter, the black-robed wizards wanted to take the two away. Of course, their purpose was not to find experimental materials for the institute. Instead, they wanted to train the mother and daughter into loyal subordinates through special means and infiltrate the wizard world. But the thoughtful Mrs. Zabanai was not willing to give in easily. She relied on her calm mind and negotiated with the other party by using her and her mother's suicide as bargaining chips. Finally, she reached an agreement with the evil organization. The agreement required that Mrs. Zabanai work according to the other party's instructions, obtain intelligence, collect various resources, etc. In return, the black-robed wizards would no longer attack the two and would not make demands that exceeded the bottom line. But in order to ensure Mrs. Zabanai's loyalty, the black-robed wizard will take some protective measures, such as poison or curse magic. So, in the following days, Mrs. Zabanai followed the organization's instructions to approach the target, get married, obtain intelligence, kill the target, obtain huge amounts of resources, and hand over the items the organization needed. Then, she approached the new target again. But how could the black-robed wizards really keep their promise? They were just boiling the frog in warm water. Every year, when the organization came to delay the outbreak of poison and curse for Madame Zabanai, they would secretly add new poison and curse magic. Madame Zabanai hated it secretly in her heart, but she fell deeper and deeper into it. What she could not tolerate the most was that 11 years ago, the organization asked her to give birth to a child, regardless of gender, but the child's appearance must not be exposed. Mrs. Zabanai was fully aware of her situation, so how could she be willing to give birth to a child and hand it over to the organization? She also roughly guessed the organization's purpose. So, she just pretended to be pregnant and adopted a newborn baby. It is unknown whether her actions were concealed from the evil organization, but since then, the organization has never mentioned anything about the child again. As time passed, when her last husband in name returned to Merlin, the adopted child was taken care of by her and her servants, and no one was allowed to see him. Whenever a servant left for some reason, Mrs. Zabanai would try her best to make him disappear in the vast sea of people. A few years ago, her mother finally died of illness. Mrs. Zabanai wanted to fight back, but the increasingly uncontrollable toxicity and curse made her sink again. Finally, at the beginning of this year, Mrs. Zabanai's guess came true. The black-robed wizard brought a little boy to her home and told her that this was her son, Blaise Zabanai. The organization required, bring the child into the social circle, show extreme love for the child, support him, and then send him to Hogwarts to study, and the adopted boy was also taken away by the black-robed wizard. The series of cruel treatments by the black-robed wizards made Mrs. Zabanai extremely angry and desperate. She had thought about ending her dark life, but her attachment to the prosperous world or her fear of unknown death made her hesitant. But today, an 11-year-old boy actually told her with a smile that he could solve this nightmare, which made her feel extremely ridiculous and unbelievable, but when the poison on her left arm really changed as he said, she was shocked and hesitated. That's right, just as the boy said, she was really impulsive now. She wished that the boy could cure her completely and escape from the control of the organization. But her remaining rationality told her that she was not ready yet, and she should think carefully about her future path. If I really get rid of these horrible constraints, will I be discovered by the organization? Will I die miserably? Perhaps it would be a good idea to run away immediately after removing the poison and curse. At least I can live the rest of my life in peace. Maybe this is an opportunity, a chance for revenge, to make this evil organization pay with blood. Mrs. Zabanai's thoughts were jumping faster and faster, but also getting more and more confused. Various thoughts came to her mind one after another, and soon she was completely stunned on the spot. Yang Tian saw all of this. He smiled slightly, stood up, and saluted to Madame Zabanai calmly, saying, "It seems that my good intentions have been felt by you. You just said that your coming here today was just a misunderstanding. Then we are even now. If you are really determined to seek treatment, you can contact me directly and we can discuss the conditions for treatment then. I believe you should know how to find me." After saying that, Yang Tian bowed to Dumbledore and left. Madame Zabanai seemed to have not heard anything, still immersed in her own world. Dumbledore was just a bystander, not saying a word from beginning to end. At this moment, he was looking at this beautiful woman and fell into deep thought. Mrs. Zabanai eventually left. No one knew whether she had talked to Dumbledore, nor what they had said. It was just rumored that Mrs. Zabanai looked very worried after she came out of the principal's office. She left in a hurry without even taking a look at her beloved son. In the following days, the Hogwarts campus was in turmoil, with all kinds of rumors spreading everywhere, and Slytherin College, the center of the storm, was constantly in the news. One by one, the once neutral little snakes stood up and expressed their concerns about the isolated incident of Slytherin College, and this momentum of expression was also spreading to other colleges. Finally, at this critical moment, Blaise Zabanai apologized. In the Slytherin common room, he apologized in front of all the little snakes in the academy. Although he tried his best to show his grace and etiquette, he could no longer hide the loneliness in his expression. He was completely excluded from the core circle of Slytherin. Brace was secretly resentful. At such a critical time, he did not get strong support from his family, let alone help from the organization. This made it difficult for him to move forward in the academy. Since the beginning of the school, everything he had worked hard for was gone in an instant. He was unwilling to accept this. For this reason, he sent a letter to the organization, asking why the action was not carried out as planned, but the reply he received made him feel overwhelmed. Because although the reply was very long, it could be summed up in one sentence: "It was all your fault, so be honest in the future." The reply letter highlighted several issues with Brace. 1. He was ambitious and chose the most core members of the pure blood families as the breakthrough point, causing all the pure blood families to unite against the enemy. 2. He was eager for quick success and instant benefits. Soon after entering the school and without a solid foundation, he started to stir up trouble everywhere, causing disputes across colleges and attracting the attention of the school. 3. Being stubborn, even though they have made numerous mistakes, they still refuse to admit defeat and stop losses in time. Instead, they try to sacrifice the greater interests of the organization to maintain their own position. At the end of the reply, the organization also sternly warned Bryce that his position in the Hogwarts team would be reduced from the second to the last. He was asked to remain silent for the time being and not to contact the organization or other team members. As for when to wake up again, he needed to wait for the organization's latest instructions. Gradually, Pansy and Daphne gathered 3 or 5 followers, and these people were naturally led by Cecilia, who surrendered first. Chapter 138, Going to the Battlefield? At 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, still in the abandoned classroom, Yang Tian, Hermione, Neville, Hannah, Penelope, Zhongqiu, and the Paddle sisters sat there with serious expressions. Yang Tian finally took a photo of the reconnaissance report of the 5 idiots in front of everyone. The detailed text description, the cruel training methods in the video, and the childish faces of the children who had long passed away, all struck the hearts of his friends like a heavy hammer. Seeing everything in front of them, everyone was very depressed. They discussed the possibility of closing down the orphanage more than once. It must be said that they were full of the enthusiasm of young people. I still firmly believe that Dumbledore should be informed of this matter. He will not stand idly by. Hermione was firm. Come on, Hermione, I don't know where your confidence comes from. I just don't understand how just kids like us and the 5 idiots can dig out so many secrets. The school really can't dig out anything? Is there something wrong with their ability or their attitude? Padma asked first. I don't think telling Dumbledore about this is a good idea either. Looking at Hermione, who wanted to refute, Penelope continued, if we tell Dumbledore the news, we will have to reveal the entire investigation process. The risk of doing so is too great. Of course, I don't doubt Dumbledore, but he also needs people to do the work. There will be too many people and too many eyes. Once our reconnaissance methods are exposed to the evil organization, we will become deaf and blind again. We cannot afford such possible consequences. Hermione paused after hearing this, and finally shut her mouth obediently. What are you afraid of? We are no pushovers. Let us wipe out these bastards once and for all. It was Parvati who spoke. It must be said that there was some reason why this girl was sorted into Gryffindor. Stop messing around, sister. How powerful are we? How dare we talk about wiping them out? These are all adult wizards. Then we can't just stand by and watch them die. Even if we have to fight to the death with these scum, we will do it at all costs. I'm just worried that even if we really fight to the death, they will be fine. You two sisters, stop arguing and just listen to what Yang Tian says. I listen to Yang Tian anyway. I have never suffered any loss following him. Neville said weakly. Everyone's eyes brightened when they heard the words, and they all stared at Yang Tian with burning eyes. Yang Tian actually had a plan in advance, and he did not shirk his responsibility at the moment, and said directly, "Here, I first want to say sorry, I intentionally let you all see such cruelty and darkness at such a young age, because this is part of the real world. You could have stayed in Hogwarts without worries, studied hard, and ignored worldly affairs. But I always believe that towering trees cannot grow in a greenhouse. So I am determined to show you all of this. My idea for this orphanage is simple. Take it down, rescue the children inside, collect evidence of the evil deeds of this den and make it public. I have also thought of a rough plan of action. Elder Xia and his group will be the main force of this attack. In addition to me, we can only send out 3 people at most. The other friends will cover our departure. This is also to protect everyone's safety as much as possible. One thing I must emphasize here is that due to the enemy's tight defense, the reconnaissance did not go smoothly. We cannot guarantee the safety of every participant. So, please think carefully. This time there is a risk of life. No, Yang Tian, this is too risky. We can't joke with our companions' lives. Hermione reacted very violently. Yang Tian said calmly, Hermione, there is no joke here, only war. There will be death in war. I don't want to say that our actions are righteous, but I have to go because I can't stand it. Yang Tian, stop talking, I'll go with you. Neville was the first to speak up. Hannah looked at Neville with a complicated expression, and finally said, count me in. And me, I've said it before, those bastards must be completely eliminated. Parvati responded immediately. Next, the friends also expressed their opinions and asked to join the action, only Hermione was sulking on the side. Yang Tian didn't waste any words, and directly took out a paper box similar to the lottery box in his previous life from his white jade ring and said, there are 20 small balls in it, 3 of which are red, and the others are transparent. Those who draw a red ball can go. Those who want to participate can come up and draw. This is unfair. There are only 7 of us, why do we need to prepare 20 balls? Zhang Chu's question naturally aroused strong support from his friends. There is no such thing as absolute fairness. I have already said that there are a maximum of 3 people. Can we go and see if God will decide? Do you want to draw? If you don't draw, it will be considered as a forfeit. The friends were about to object, but saw Hermione walking over angrily and thrusting her hand directly into the box. The friends were not happy with this and covered the paper box tightly. Parvati was the first to ask, little Hermione, you strongly opposed the plan just now, why are you touching the ball now? Hermione was not moved at all, and continued angrily, I am against your participation, not my participation. Just like the last incident in the restricted area. Facts have proved that I can help. I also have the ability to survive on that damn battlefield. Hearing this, Yang Tian lamented in his heart, this is a typical double-standard dog, and a not very smart one at that. This kid is probably going to be in trouble. Sure enough, before Hermione finished her words, the girls went wild. Little Hermione, who are you looking down on? I was a little flustered last time because the incident happened suddenly. You don't have to worry about it for so long. I'll teach you a lesson today. Penelope took the lead and rushed forward. That's right. What do you mean by opposing our participation? Are we stupid? Today I'll let you know how powerful sisters are. The girls immediately started playing together, but the next moment, Hermione suddenly screamed in surprise, wow! I won! Ha 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 ha! Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and sure enough, wasn't there a red round bead clenched in the hand that was forcibly pulled out? Lucky guy! Now the friends were no longer in the mood to play around and rushed forward to try their luck. The result was naturally that some people were excited, while others lamented. In the end, all 3 red balls were drawn, namely Hermione, Padma, and Penelope. Looking at his unwilling friends, Yang Tian smiled and said, "Believe me, since we are facing this mysterious organization, this will definitely not be the last battle. Everyone will have the opportunity to participate. Moreover, the mission in the school is also very heavy. You need to provide us with perfect alibi." As he spoke, he took out 7 more white jade beads and said, "From now on, you can't leave this bead. It can effectively defend against attacks by Leviticus. However, this white jade bead also has disadvantages. It is only a consumable. You should always pay attention to the changes in the size of the white jade bead. If it becomes the size of a little finger, come to me in time to get a new one. Also, the team will include acclumency and disillusionment in their learning and training plans starting today. Everyone must master them as soon as possible, as there are not many of these white jade beads." Everyone was very surprised when they heard this. They took the white jade beads and looked at them curiously. Chapter 139, Play Quidditch First. On Saturday morning, the atmosphere at Hogwarts, which was originally tense due to the Slytherin reputation crisis, suddenly changed, and anticipation and excitement returned to the faces of the young wizards. Because today was the day for the match between the Ravenclaw Quidditch team and the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. During breakfast, the hall became a sea of joy again. Everyone was showing off their flying experiences and analyzing the trend of the game. As the topic deepened, the young wizards began to discuss which school would win the Quidditch game this year. The scene was very joyful. At the Ravenclaw dining table, Yang Tian ate breakfast leisurely, listening casually to everyone's discussion. It was obvious that he didn't take the competition to heart at all. The friends on the side were discussing how many points Yang Tian could get in the game. Neville and Hannah, who were students from rival colleges, rarely went to the Ravenclaw table to eat breakfast, but they still gave Yang Tian a cheering gesture from a distance. Only Zhang Qiu kept his head down and stabbed the pumpkin pie on the plate with a fork, but he didn't want to eat anything. Yang Tian was stunned when he saw it, and then asked in a rather exaggerated tone, "Qiu, you are not nervous, are you?" Zhang Qiu blushed when she heard that. She looked up at Yang Tian weakly and felt embarrassed when she saw his teasing expression. She raised her head deliberately and said, "I would be nervous? You must be joking." But the tone of her voice sounded like she was bluffing. Penelope glared at Yang Tian and said, "Do you think everyone is as heartless as you? Isn't it normal for Qiu to be nervous when it's her first Quidditch match?" Yang Tian was unmoved. He patted Zhang Qiu's shoulders repeatedly. When Zhang Qiu glared at him angrily, he smiled and said, "Didn't you say you wanted to fight alongside me a few days ago? Fight with me. Shouldn't you be happy? Why are you so nervous?" Hey! Simple actions and simple words, but like magic, Zhang Qiu felt extremely relieved instantly. She couldn't help but smile, made a strong gesture of encouragement, and then ate breakfast in big mouthfuls. "Tisk, if I had known this would happen, why would I have persuaded you like a fool for a whole day and night? Wouldn't it be enough to just throw you to Yang Tian?" Penelope screamed half-truthfully, and the more she thought about it, the angrier she became, and she said, "1,000 words I say are not as good as one word from others. It really breaks my heart. Can we still be friends happily?" Zhang Qiu was speechless when he heard this. "What nonsense are you talking about all day? I will tear your mouth off." Then he rushed over to tickle Penelope, and the two of them soon started playing together, with laughter all the time. After a leisurely breakfast, the friends packed up their cheering tools and rushed to the Quidditch field. Although the game didn't start until 11 o'clock, the seats of the 4 major colleges were already packed with young wizards who came to watch. Yang Tian couldn't help but sigh. In this wizarding world where entertainment resources are extremely scarce, Quidditch is really extremely popular. Seeing that their friends were already seated, Yang Tian and Zhang Qiu walked into the locker room and changed into the blue and grey team uniforms. According to the previous process, Roger should have given a pre-match speech next, but after waiting for a long time, the players found that the captain had been stealing glances at Yang Tian, as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Yang Tian didn't react for a moment and couldn't help but look at Roger with a questioning look. Roger coughed awkwardly a few times before saying, "As the highest level Quidditch player in Ravenclaw, would you like to say a few words before the game? Yang Tian suddenly realized, you are the captain, what can I say? After a pause, he said, but don't feel any psychological pressure. We only had one run in before the game. If we really lose today, we can run in together every day before the next game to ensure victory in the next game. It would have been fine if they hadn't said this, but once they did, their teammates immediately became unnatural. The last practice session was still fresh in everyone's mind. Practice every day? Are they going to let people live? Everyone felt keenly that if they couldn't defeat their opponent today, their future would be bleak. Such emotions naturally infected the captain Roger, so in the following time, Roger began his pre-match speech and tactical arrangements with unprecedented seriousness, and the players listened even more carefully, fearing to miss any details. Yang Tian was very happy to see this scene. Although he didn't like riding a broom and was not interested in the sport of Quidditch, this didn't stop him from winning the Quidditch championship for Professor Flitwick and the Ravenclaw team. Yang Tian had also gotten to know these teammates privately. It was certain that they liked Quidditch and were willing to work hard for it, but it was unnecessary to say that they were crazy about it or even got injured because of it. Imagine if Yang Tian was on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, would have to lead the players in hard training? But in Ravenclaw, Yang Tian was willing, but the players were not. So he had to push everyone and make them give their all. And time passed quietly during the lengthy tactical arrangements. In the blink of an eye, the gate leading to the competition venue slowly opened, and everyone knew that it was time to set off. All the players stood together in a circle, pointed their fists at the center, and shouted, "Come on!" At that moment, the momentum was overwhelming. Then, they walked out the door holding their respective broomsticks. At this time, the stadium's audience seats were already extremely noisy, as if it were a festival. As the game commentator Lee Jordan introduced the game, the audience exclaimed in admiration. "Look, the Hufflepuff team is out. Walking in the front is the captain, Dunstan, a veteran Hufflepuff. This is his last year. I hope he can realize his dream." After Dunstan waved, he shot up into the sky like a cannonball, drawing cheers from the little badgers. Next, when each Hufflepuff member was introduced, they performed their own signature moves, which received thunderous applause from the badgers. "Wow, look everyone, the Ravenclaw players are coming towards us. The one walking in front is undoubtedly the captain Roger. He is our old rival and has excellent speed and passing vision." Lee Jordan's commentary voice came again. Roger was gentle and elegant, and glided up with an extremely graceful move, which also won continuous applause from the audience. The following introductions were uneventful, with the Ravenclaw players appearing one by one in an orderly manner. Suddenly, Lee Jordan's voice became extremely high-pitched, and he shouted excitedly, "The person I'm going to introduce to you now is a historic figure in Hogwarts, because he is the only student in Hogwarts history who was selected for the Quidditch team in his first year. Let us remember his name. Yang Tian." Yang Tian's face darkened when he heard this. Isn't this flattery? With such high evaluation, if he performed mediocrely, wouldn't he be criticized to death? With this thought in mind, Yang Tian no longer held back. He held the broom handle tightly in his left hand, stepped on the end of the broom with both feet, lowered his head slightly, and made a standard chest-touching gesture with his free right hand. His manners were elegant, exuding an aristocratic aura. The little wizards in the stands were attracted by his actions and looked up. However, Yang Tian kept this posture, and the flying broomstick carried his body and spun like a gyroscope. As the speed of rotation increased, Yang Tian and his flying broomstick gradually took off, and rose higher and higher. The beautiful picture attracted everyone present. This is not the end. When Yang Tiansheng reached a high place, he pushed hard with his left foot and flew upwards. At the same time, the Nimbus 2000 was thrown straight into the air after his left hand performed juggling operations. The audience couldn't help but stand up, shouting in surprise. Many people even covered their eyes out of fear. Everyone thought something had happened. However, after the thrown broom reached a certain distance, it quickly withdrew like a boomerang and flew back to the previous position steadily, catching Yang Tian who was already falling. The whole process was thrilling, but also beautiful. The audience went completely crazy, and cheers louder and louder filled the entire stadium. Mrs. Huoqi, who had been waiting in the middle of the court, was also very excited. However, as a referee, she calmed herself down and gathered the players from both sides around her and said, "Listen, I hope everyone will participate in the game fairly and honestly. Members of both teams nodded in agreement upon hearing this, and then the 15 flying brooms flew back to their respective tactical positions. Listen to my whistle. 3, 2, 1. Madam Hooch blew the silver whistle hard, and the game finally began. Chapter 140. Amazing performance. Wow, what did we see? The quaffle landed in the hands of Ravenclaw Captain Roger at the start of the game. Lee Jordan's commentary began at the right time, beautiful serpentine movement. Wow, the ball has been passed. I have to say that Roger and Jason's cooperation is still so tacit. Wait, what is Jason doing? Is he shooting from such a long distance? It's too far. There are some problems with the coordination of Ravenclaw. They don't seem to trust their junior brother very much. They didn't cooperate indirectly. Before Lee Jordan could finish his words, a handsome young man suddenly appeared on the quaffle's path, which was originally empty. He held the ball steadily in his hand, changed direction with his broom, and rushed towards the goal. He was so excited at this time that he couldn't help shouting, "I apologize for my arbitrary behavior just now. This is a spiritual cooperation." However, Tamsin's reaction was also very fast. He had already blocked Yang Tian's flight path. Very good, Yang Tian reacted quickly. He quickly pressed down his shoulders and tilted his body weight to the right. It seems that he is going to break through from the lower right. Very good, Tamsin is still so experienced. He has already moved down and blocked the flight. Oh, no, Merlin, that was just a fake move by Yang Tian. He just flew straight over and Tamsin was shaken off. Goalkeeper Dunstan is attacking. Yes, he must stand up at this time. Wow, how dare you! Yang Tian actually used the same action again, quickly pressing down with his shoulders and tilting his body's center of gravity to the right. Believe me, brother, anyone who is shaken away by this move again must be a fool. Yang Tian, you will pay for your underestimation of the enemy. Oh, no. This time it was actually true, he actually broke through from the bottom right. Oh my god, it was an empty goal, it went in. He scored in less than 20 seconds after the start. 10:0, Ravenclaw is leading. A quick and spiritual pass, 2 criminal passes, that's right, Yang Tian, you are committing a crime. Believe me, you are not far from being beaten. Seeing Professor McGonagall's stern gaze, Lee Jordan quickly changed his words and said, what I mean is that Yang Tian is too strong. Yes, that's what I mean. At this time, the stadium was filled with deafening cheers. The audience was cheering for the wonderful moment just now. Even the yellow sea of Hufflepuffs, although a little frustrated, still gracefully applauded Ravenclaw's performance. The ball was back in Hufflepuff's hands when Lee Jordan's commentary resumed, it's Tamsin with the ball now, Roger comes in to intercept. Great, the quaffle goes to Heidi. Ravenclaw fails to intercept. Jason is now in Heidi's path. Heidi changes direction, and wow, she gets past Jason. I have to say that although Ravenclaw's offense is always sharp, their defense is their weakest link. Wow, I found something, Duncan hit the bludger at Heidi. Great. Heidi drifted beautifully again and dodged. Merlin, what did I see? Heidi, watch out for what's below you. Lee Jordan, who was in high spirits, cried out in horror at the end of his commentary. At this moment, Yang Tian appeared like a ghost right below Heidi's broom. He stood upside down and flew with Heidi as if they were looking at each other in a mirror. Suddenly, Yang Tian stretched out his hand and quickly poked the quaffle in Heidi's arm. Lee Jordan saw it and immediately screamed, Yang Tian, please, take back your evil hands, please. Oh, no. As soon as the voice fell, the quaffle miraculously appeared in Yang Tian's hands, causing the audience to exclaim again. Heidi, in particular, was completely confused at this time. Although she had just heard Lee Jordan's shout, this position was in his blind spot. No matter how he looked around, he could not find Yang Tian. The next moment, the ball was already in Yang Tian's arms. How could he not collapse? This is not the end yet. After Yang Tian got the ball, he actually started to climb up to the sky desperately. The audience around him looked at each other in confusion. What was he doing? There was no need for everyone to think too long, because Yang Tian had already given the answer. After he climbed to a certain height, he turned the light wheel 2000 to point directly Indiana front of the goal, then dived forward and accelerated. The powerful forward momentum combined with the huge downward kinetic energy made Yang Tian rush straight towards the goal like an unstoppable king, and huge air waves were created wherever he passed. The Hufflepuff players were stunned by the scene before their eyes, and almost all of them stood there in shock. Only the batsman Anthony reacted the fastest, swinging his bat vigorously and hitting the bludger hard towards Yang Tian. But Yang Tian was too fast, he didn't even have time to dodge, and the bludger flew out from behind him. A moment later, Yang Tian was face to face with goalkeeper Dunstan again. Facing Yang Tian, who had not changed his trajectory from beginning to end, and the huge storm that came with this handsome boy, Dunstan's body stiffened and cold sweat broke out. In just a moment of distraction, the quaffle in Yang Tian's hand disappeared. The next moment, the sound of shock and admiration rang out again, 20:0. The following competition became Yang Tian's personal show. His handsome appearance, noble temperament, overwhelming momentum, and superb skills brought a visual feast to all the audience. As time went by, the score quickly reached 200:10. Suddenly, the seeker Zhang Qiu, who had been hovering above the playing field, fixed his eyes, swooped down and chased after him. Wow, did Zhang Qiu find the golden snitch? Lee Jordan's passionate commentary came at the right time. Cedric was moved when he heard this, and he adjusted his flying broom and chased after him desperately. But his reaction was still too slow, and he was left behind by Zhang Qiu by about 7 or 8 meters. At this moment, Hufflepuff's hitter Maxine hit the bludger hard in the direction of Zhang Qiu. Cedric also seized the opportunity and immediately accelerated, trying to block Zhang Qiu in front of him to seize a favorable position. But Zhang Qiu was not in a hurry. She and her Nimbus 2000 flew out of the encirclement like a dragonfly skimming the water. After a few more elf-like flying gestures, she had already arrived next to the golden snitch. At this time, Cedric had been left far behind, and victory was in sight. Just as she reached out to grab the golden snitch, Anthony, another Hufflepuff beater, hit the bludger back and headed straight for Zhang Qiu. At this moment, Zhang Qiu was completely immersed in the concentration of catching the thief, and was completely unaware of the danger around him. The audience around him felt their hearts tighten when they saw this scene, and couldn't help but exclaim. Yang Tian, who was not far away, was furious when he saw this scene. How could he watch Zhang Qiu get hurt? After a little thought, Yang Tian came up with a plan. Predicting the flight trajectory of the bludger, he used all his strength and hit the quaffle hard. There was a loud bang, like the sound of sacks colliding, and both the quaffle and the bludger deviated from their original trajectories. Zhang Qiu managed to catch the golden snitch without any danger. The Quidditch Stadium was filled with thunderous applause. The Quidditch match, which was like a visual feast, ended here, but the audience's enthusiasm did not diminish at all. Heated discussions continued one after another, and the names of Yang Tian and Zhang Qiu spread wildly on campus.